The earth trembles as a stampede of great horns tears through the forest, crushing everything in their path. Two terrified drivers stare death in the face as the monsters close in on their fragile carriage. Panic takes the wheel as they whip the horses, desperate to outrun the thundering doom behind them. A massive beast lunges, its red eyes signaling a gruesome end that seems inevitable. But that bloody fate remains a mere possibility as the carriage rolls peacefully past a quiet signpost in reality. Inside, a young guide activates his unique ability, ensuring the safety of everyone on board. His eye glows with a mystical purple light, piercing through the veil of the physical world. He perceives the deadly herd as ominous energy signatures, spotting the ambush long before it happens. Calmly, he advises the group to take a detour, warning them of the massive monster herd lying in wait. The merchant's wife breathes a sigh of relief, grateful they hired a guide while her husband just scowls. The boy explains that his skill, Guidepost, is designed to calculate the absolute safest route to any destination. But the merchant snaps, demanding to know why they should thank a kid for dragging them on a longer road. As they travel the safe path, the man grumbles that the boy is likely hallucinating dangers just to get paid. The guide lowers his head, resigned to the fact that preventing danger means no one ever sees the bullet he dodged for them. Even the hired muscle joins the pile-on, mocking him as a bum-skill weakling who's useless in a real fight. He forces a polite smile, letting the insult slide off him like water, though the disrespect stings. In this world, magic stones harvested from dungeons are the ultimate resource, versatile and precious. These glittering crystals are the bedrock of society, fueling the economy and magical technology alike. They power the sprawling cities, keeping the lights on and the darkness at bay. Blacksmiths rely on them to forge the enchanted weapons and armor that keep humanity in the food chain. But since these stones are guarded by terrifying monsters in deep dungeons, supply is always a bloody business. This elevates combat adventurers to celebrity status, worshipped for their ability to kill and conquer. Conversely, non-combatants like our guide are treated as bums, their subtle contributions dismissed with contempt. The carriage finally arrives at the bustling city, the journey concluding without a single scratch on anyone. The merchant's wife offers a warm thank you, genuinely pleased to have arrived safely. She drops a few coins into his palm, a meager reward for saving their lives, but it's standard treatment. Her husband immediately ruins the moment, screaming that the detour made them late for the market. He berates the boy as a coward and a fraud, blaming him for losing business to a rival merchant. As they storm off, the man loudly complains that he would have preferred keeping his money over paying a con artist. One of the escort knights asks his blonde companion if he shares the merchant's low opinion of the guide. The blonde knight from the escort reveals he wasn't just idling. He used a surveillance spell to check the road they skipped. His magic confirms the grim truth. The original path was a slaughterhouse waiting to happen, just as the boy predicted. Realizing the guide wasn't hallucinating, the knight acknowledges that the boy's survival instincts are the real deal. Meanwhile, Rude is still on the cobblestones, gathering the few copper scraps thrown at him like he's a pigeon in the park. A polished boot steps into his view, and the knight calls out his name, stopping him mid-humiliation. The man introduces himself as Marx, leader of the Steel Moon Guild, and extends a hand not to mock, but to recruit. Root blinks in confusion, unable to comprehend why a high-ranking adventurer would want a non-combatant like him. They relocate to a tavern to talk business, a stark contrast to the screaming match rout just endured on the street. Marx brings up the Emerald Dew Labyrinth, a notorious new dungeon that has swallowed every adventurer who dared enter. Reports claim the prize lies deep within, but the dungeon's layout shifts, turning it into a one-way trip for greedy explorers. The knight explains their theory. Getting in is the easy part, but the return journey is where the labyrinth becomes a death trap. He points a finger directly at Rout, declaring that his ability to find the safest path is the missing key to their survival. The realization hits Root like a lightning bolt. His useless skill is actually the only thing that can guarantee an exit. Marx isn't asking for charity, assuring the boy that the guild is prepared to pay handsomely for his unique talent. He drops a heavy bag on the table, offering 30 gold coins just for the successful completion of the mission. Root stares at the bag, his mind racing as he calculates that this single job pays more than 6 months of grueling labor. The golden glow reflects in his eyes, sparking a desperate hope that he might finally change his stars. For a guy used to counting coppers, this payout looks less like a salary and more like a miracle raining from the sky. But his motivation isn't greed. It's the image of his little sister, the one person he needs to protect from this cruel world. Dark memories surface of their foster mother, a woman whose kindness evaporated the moment they became a financial burden. He remembers the nights she screamed at his sister, threatening to sell the poor girl off if they didn't bring in enough cash. Root had thrown himself between them, begging the woman to stop her tyranny, but he was powerless against her authority. She played the benevolent savior card, reminding them that without her generosity, they'd be street rats. Desperation had forced him to beg for more time, promising to scrape together every last coin to pay off their debt. But the woman's patience had run dry, and she delivered a chilling ultimatum that haunts him to this day. If the back rent isn't paid by the month's end, his sister will be sold into slavery to cover the balance. Root had bowed his head in defeat, accepting the impossible terms just to buy his sister a few more days of safety. He swore to her then, holding her trembling shoulders, that he would move heaven and earth to keep her free. His sister, Rona, is cursed with the same fate as him, possessing a non-combat skill that society deems utterly worthless. They have been alone since the day a dungeon break unleashed a dragon that tore their parents away from them forever. A reptilian roar echoes through the cavern as the dungeon welcomes its new guests with open jaws. The Steel Moon members waste no time, their weapons carving through the beast's hide with practiced efficiency. Marks leads the charge, his blade wreathed in green energy that slices through the monster like butter. As the dust settles, the party catches their breath, the threat neutralized by the veteran's overwhelming power. Marks turns to the rear guard, advising the non-combatants to stay back since this is their first rodeo. Beside Root stands a young mage, clutching her hat as if it's the only thing keeping her grounded. Root asks for her story, realizing she's an outsider to the guild just like him. She explains she was recruited in town, told that training newbies is a noble duty of the veteran adventurers. Root smiles, his admiration for Marks growing as he realizes the knight is helping multiple beginners today. The girl admits she's terrified, and Root finds comfort in knowing he isn't the only one trembling in his boots. Their bonding is interrupted by the axe-wielding member, who finds the sight of two terrified novices hilarious. He mocks Rout's ability, sneering that guidepost is just a fancy word for running away like a coward. Root stays silent, the insult hitting a sore spot, but he knows better than to argue with a man holding a giant axe. Mark steps in immediately, his voice sharp as he reminds the brute that he personally requested the boy's help. He reiterates that the return trip is the true danger, and Rout's eyes will be their lifeline when mana runs low. The leader shuts down the bullying with a stern look, demanding respect for the chain of command. Root stammers a thank you, grateful to finally have someone in authority who values his existence. As he watches Marks's back, he thinks that if every adventurer were this honorable, the world wouldn't be such a hellhole. He and the young mage share a relieved smile, convinced they've lucked out by joining the best team possible. The group pushes deeper until they reach a massive chamber that feels distinctly different from the rest of the cave. In the center of the cavern sits an ancient altar, bathed in an ethereal light that beckons them forward. Marks's face lights up with triumph, announcing that they have finally reached the dungeon's heart. Resting on the pedestal is the Tears of Emerald Dew, a massive mana crystal pulsing with raw power. The sheer density of magic radiating from the stone leaves the two novices completely awestruck. The axe warrior steps forward, greed practically dripping from his mouth as he wonders how many fortunes this rock is worth. But just as he reaches out, Root's vision fractures, his skill screaming a warning that shatters the moment. He shouts for them to stop, his voice echoing desperately against the stone walls. Root warns them that taking the stone is the trigger that will seal the dungeon and trap them forever. The veterans pause, looking back at the boy who is frantically trying to prevent their entombment. He explains that while he can't see the mechanism, his gut tells him the exit will collapse the moment that stone moves. The veterans suddenly glow with vitality, announcing that their mana reserves are fully topped off. The guild's sorceress reveals the source, dumping every ounce of her energy into a spell called Quick Boost. Marks and the axe warrior flex their enhanced muscles, looking less like heroes and more like predators. Root clutches the fainting mage girl, demanding to know why his teammates are acting so strange. Marks's polite mask dissolves, and he explains that since the spell is temporary, he'll keep the betrayal short. He lectures them on the economics of dungeon crawling, noting that traps are a massive drain on resources. The solution was simple. Bring a canary to trigger the deadly mechanism so the real adventurers stay safe. Root's blood runs cold as he realizes he isn't a guide, he's just disposable meat for the grinder. And the girl wasn't a recruit either. She was a living battery, drained dry just to buff the veterans. Marks grins with chilling confidence, declaring that sacrificing two nobodies guarantees the guild's success. Rout screams at the injustice, but Marks just offers a sarcastic apology, saying he has no time for complaints. The axe warrior ignores the danger warning and snatches the crystal, deliberately triggering the trap. He shouts for the team to move, his face twisted in a manic mixture of greed and adrenaline. The crystal pulses in his grip, the dungeon's defense mechanism roaring to life around them. He flashes a mocking peace sign, telling the kids to catch them if they can, knowing they can't. The ceiling begins to fracture, and panic seizes the two novices as the world comes down. Marks laughs as they speed away, leaving the dead weight behind to be buried alive. The veterans vanish into the corridor, their enhanced speed carrying them to safety while the room collapses. Massive boulders slam into the doorway, sealing the exit with a final thunderous crash. Dust settles over the tomb, and Root realizes the heroes have left them to die in the dark. The thought of his sister waiting for him pierces his heart. The fear of failing her worse than death. Refusing to accept this end, he screams into the void, commanding his skill to find a path to survival. Guidepost answers his call, purple energy erupting from his eyes to scan the crumbling chamber. The lines of light ignore the blocked exit, instead converging on a specific point within the room. Root follows the trail, his gaze landing on a strange structure that stands defiant amidst the rubble. A glowing throne sits in the center, humming with an ominous blue light that feels ancient. A holographic command manifests in the air: destroy the throne and absorb the jet-black magic stone. Root stares at the floating text, confused by the video game-like instruction in a life-or-death moment. He steps closer to the pedestal, where a small, dark object rests in a pool of light. The mage girl gasps in horror, noting that a black magic stone defies the natural laws of the elements. The sound of crumbling stone snaps their attention upward as the dungeon ceiling gives way. A massive green dragon crashes into the chamber, its three eyes glowing with predatory malice. The mage girl screams in terror, recognizing the beast as an S-rank calamity that shouldn't be here. It roars, a sound that shakes the very foundation of the room, blocking their only path of retreat. The sheer pressure of the monster's aura nearly knocks them off their feet, tearing through the air like a physical blow. Rout grips the black stone, shouting at the system that he accepts its crazy demand. The holographic screens multiply, spamming the command to absorb the object if he wants to live. He stares at the marble-sized orb, realizing absorb likely means he has to swallow the thing whole. The dragon prepares to stomp them into paste, and the mage girl begs him to run, unaware of his plan. But Root stands his ground, trusting that his guidepost has never led him astray before. With death closing in, he decides that choking on a rock is a better way to go than being dragon chow. He throws the stone into his mouth and swallows it, committing to the desperate gamble. The mage girl watches in horror, thinking he's lost his mind just as the dragon's foot comes down. The impact shakes the room, debris flying everywhere as the beast tries to crush the insects. Root grabs the girl and dives, barely evading the massive green tail that sweeps through their position. They tumble across the rocky floor, battered and bruised, but miraculously still breathing. As he shields her body, a chime rings out in his mind, signaling that the digestion process is complete. The system announces that the jet-black stone has been absorbed, triggering a sudden evolution. Red warning lights flood his vision, declaring that the restrictions on his guide skill are being forcibly removed. Root gasps as a surge of energy floods his veins, questioning what it means to have his limits unlocked. New windows pop up in his peripheral vision, offering guides for things far beyond simple navigation. He sees options for magic circuits, evolution paths, and even combat procedures, realizing his skill was never just a map. The sheer amount of information overwhelms him, painting the world in a digital overlay of infinite possibilities. He realizes that for his entire life he's been driving a sports car in first gear without knowing it. The fear in his eyes is replaced by a sharp golden focus as the new data streams settle into his mind. The green dragon glares down at them, confused why its prey hasn't been squashed yet. The mage girl looks up at him, sensing a shift in the air around the boy who was trembling just moments ago. Rote steps forward, placing his trust entirely in the new power coursing through his system. He reaches out to the interface, his hand selecting the option that promises them a future. The subjugation procedure guide activates, turning the terrifying dragon into a solvable puzzle. The system locks onto the target, initiating a combat protocol that turns the terrifying beast into a mere objective to be cleared. Root grips the trembling mage, his voice cutting through the chaos with a vow to drag them both back to the surface alive. The dragon lunges, but the interface flashes a command faster than thought, ordering an evasion to the left. Root processes the instruction, his mind reeling at the counterintuitive order to dive toward danger instead of away from it. The safe path lies wide open to the right, while the guide points a glowing arrow straight into a jagged pile of rubble. He stares at the debris in disbelief, wondering if his newfound power is trying to get him killed faster than the dragon. Logic screams that the open corridor is the only way out, and for a split second he doubts the digital voice in his head. The beast's maw opens wide, energy gathering for a breath attack that promises to incinerate everything in its cone. With milliseconds to spare, Root has to choose between his human survival instinct and the cold calculation of the system. He grits his teeth, shoving down the fear and making the choice that defies all common sense. Grabbing Lillian by the arm, he drags her toward the rubble, screaming for her to follow his lead blindly. A beam of pure destruction erupts from the dragon's mouth, scorching the air where they had been standing just a heartbeat ago. The blast sweeps across the safe open area, obliterating the ground in a blinding flash of pink energy. Root watches from cover, realizing with a shudder that the obvious escape route was actually a one-way ticket to the afterlife. As the smoke clears, the ground reveals a hidden pit of spikes, proving the entire room was rigged to punish the predictable. Cold sweat drips down his face as he understands that without the guide, his instincts would have led them straight into a trap. The green dragon snaps its jaws shut, visibly annoyed that these two pests refuse to be vaporized. But there's no time to celebrate survival, as a new window pops up with instructions on how to fight back. The text demands he open Lillian's magic circuits to unleash a spell belonging to a legendary archmage. A massive green claw comes crashing down, forcing them to scramble as the environment shatters around them. Root looks at his hands, feeling a strange, foreign knowledge guiding his fingers as if he's done this 1,000 times. He places a hand on Lillian, channeling energy directly into her core to manually override her magical limitations. They stand defiant on a precarious peak of rubble, the dragon looming large as the air begins to vibrate with power. Lillian gasps as her mana reserves overflow, her body glowing with an intensity she never knew she possessed. The system provides the final piece of the puzzle, scrolling the incantation for a spell capable of slaying a dragon. Root barks orders like a seasoned commander, telling the bewildered girl to mirror his words exactly. He begins the chant, calling upon the blaze of the heavens while Lillian struggles to keep up with the ancient verse. The dragon senses the shift in power, its predatory eyes widening as the prey suddenly becomes the threat. Their voices synchronize, weaving the mana into a destructive force that demands the spirits of the inferno to awaken. A torrent of golden fire erupts from the girl's hands, blasting the dragon with a flame breath that rivals its own power. The golden fire consumes the beast, blinding them with a sheer intensity that rivals the sun itself. A pillar of light erupts toward the ceiling, shaking the cavern as if the world is splitting apart at the seams. Lillian stares at her own hand in disbelief, trembling as the adrenaline crash hits her all at once. But the victory celebration is cut short by a new system alert, demanding they immobilize the target using the terrain. Through the smoke, the green dragon rises again, scorched and battered, but definitely not dead. Panic reclaims the mage girl, and she screams that she's tapped out and they need to flee immediately. Root shuts down that idea, his eyes locked on the interface as he declares they are ending this fight right now. The beast charges, a massive wall of green scales and muscle intent on flattening them into the floor. Root points to a massive stalactite hanging above, ordering her to shoot it, but she freezes in confusion. She screams that she doesn't want to die, her survival instincts screaming to run rather than shoot at rocks. The image of his sister flashes in his mind, her helpless face mirroring the terrified girl standing before him. That memory hardens his resolve, his eyes sharpening with a determination that refuses to accept failure. He grabs her shoulders, shouting over the chaos that listening to him is the only way she survives this nightmare. Staring into her tear-filled eyes, he begs her to trust him one last time, staking his life on the plan. The dragon closes the distance, its jaws dripping with anticipation of a crunchy snack. Lillian swallows her fear, raising a trembling hand to obey the crazy command of her guide. She unleashes a fireball, sending a streak of crimson magic soaring toward the ceiling instead of the monster. The spell detonates against the stone, and for a terrifying second, nothing seems to happen amidst the smoke. A massive green claw steps forward, the beast seemingly unfazed by the light show above. It towers over them, casting a shadow that feels like the Reaper's cloak descending. Rote and Lillian freeze, looking up at death as the monster prepares to deliver the final blow. The dragon roars in triumph, unaware that gravity is about to file a noise complaint. Suddenly, the ceiling gives way, and tons of jagged rock come crashing down directly onto the beast's head. The impact is deafening, burying the monster under a mountain of debris while the two humans watch in awe. Silence returns to the chamber, and Root exhales, whispering that they actually pulled off the impossible. But the digital interface is a cruel taskmaster, flashing a red alert that the subjugation is far from complete. The pile of rubble begins to shift, glowing spikes piercing through the stone as something stirs beneath. Lillian's relief shatters instantly, her face paling as she realizes the nightmare isn't over. She mutters a hopeless complaint, unable to believe that dropping a mountain on the thing wasn't enough. The green dragon rises from its grave, grinning with a durability that suggests it's simply too angry to die. Lillian finally hits her limit, her mana reserves completely dry and her body failing. She stumbles through the darkness, her legs heavy with exhaustion and fear. The green dragon looms directly behind her, its jaws opening for a light snack. Tears fill her eyes as she assumes Root abandoned her just like the veterans did. But a rock slams into the beast's jaw, rudely interrupting its mealtime. Root steps into the light, shouting to get the overgrown lizard's attention. He taunts the monster, revealing he swallowed the very treasure it was guarding. The dragon's gaze snaps to him, realizing its precious stone is now inside the boy. Root braces himself, adrenaline masking the terror of being live dragon bait. The beast ignores the girl and charges, thundering past her to get to the main course. Root sprints with everything he has, his life depending entirely on his foot speed. Lillian screams his name, watching helplessly as he draws the monster away. The gap closes rapidly, the dragon's breath hot on his heels. He looks back in panic, just as the massive jaws open to swallow him whole. But the dragon's foot lands exactly where Root intended, right on the unstable ground. The floor gives way, plunging the beast into the darkness below. Root collapses, gasping for air as the adrenaline crash hits him hard. The system confirms his plan worked perfectly, luring the target into the hidden spike pit. Below, the dragon lies impaled on massive crystals, finally silenced by the trap. Lillian rushes over, realizing her guide never planned to leave her behind. She reaches him just as he catches his breath, relief washing over them both. A notification flashes in the air, confirming the impossible. The S-rank threat is dead. They stare at the carcass, hardly believing two novices took down a legend. Root's eyes widen as a new surge of energy pulses through the room. A glowing pink path manifests on the ground, cutting through the gloom. Root hoists the exhausted girl onto his back, grateful the boss fight unlocked the door. The system politely reminds him to loot the corpse before leaving. A massive green magic stone floats up from the remains, a fortune in raw mana. Ahead, the cave walls give way to the blinding, beautiful light of the surface. They step into the sun, battered but alive, leaving the dungeon that was meant to be their grave. The rhythmic rattle of carriage wheels stirs the world into a new morning. Root jolts awake, sweat clinging to his skin as the dungeon nightmares fade into reality. He finds himself under the watchful eyes of armored knights and a stern red-haired commander. She identifies him instantly, her voice carrying the weight of authority as she mentions the nearby dungeon. Reports indicate adventurers entered the Labyrinth, but the ominous silence suggests none came out. Her sharp gaze bores into him, sensing that he holds the key to the tragedy inside. Their interrogation is cut short when a soldier points a frantic finger toward the horizon. Thick black smoke billows into the sky, painting a grim picture of disaster in the distance. Root's face pales as he screams that the burning village is his hometown. Miles away, a blonde girl stands frozen as her world is systematically shattered by a liar. Marks wears a mask of practiced grief, telling Rona that her brother fell to a monster they couldn't defeat. He claims they couldn't even recover the body, while his cronies lurk in the background like vultures. Seamlessly, he pivots from tragedy to transaction, bringing up the adventurer's death benefit. Rona lowers her head, playing the part of the grieving sister while processing the bureaucratic cruelty. Marks leans in with fake sympathy, insisting she is far too fragile to handle the complex paperwork. He claims his guild must file reports anyway, framing his greed as a convenient act of charity. The pitch is simple. Sign the rights over to him, and he'll handle the messy legal process. He slides a power of attorney across the table, the key to legally stealing her inheritance. Handing her a pen, he condescendingly asks if she even knows how to write. His teammates snicker in the shadows, marveling at the sheer audacity of their leader's performance. Marks twists the knife, bringing up her late father to manipulate her into signing quickly. Rona glances at the family shrine, confirming they survive on their father's pension. She speaks of her father, a noble swordsman who fought on the front lines of the world. He was a hero called to quest far and wide, leaving a legacy of honor. Her voice trembles as she recalls that Root's only dream was to follow in those footsteps. Marks interrupts the eulogy, urging her to sign so her brother can provide for her one last time. But Rona pauses, a dark question forming as an ominous purple aura bleeds into the room. She grips the pen, activating a secret skill to ask the shadows if these men are lying. Suddenly, a deafening crash outside interrupts the fraud before the ink can hit the paper. Panic erupts as a monster stampede tears through the town, leaving Marks confused as Rona rushes to action. Rona stands her ground, her voice trembling with rage as she accuses the heroes of murdering her brother. The accusation hits the mark, and the Steel Moon members exchange glances, realizing their cover story has just been blown wide open. Marks decides that a witness is a liability, signaling his goons to silence the girl and trash the room to make it look like an accident. A twisted smile plays on his lips as he plans to blame her death on the monster stampede outside, tying up the loose end perfectly. Meanwhile, the rescue wagon tears through the streets, Rout screaming his sister's name as he spots the familiar house. The town is a war zone, with the red-haired commander diving into the fray to hold back the beasts while Rout abandons the vehicle. He sprints toward his home, ignoring the carnage around him, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm of fear. The house stands amidst the chaos, a fragile shelter that looks far too quiet given the violence erupting outside. Root crashes through the door, desperate to intervene before Marks can execute his grim plan. But he freezes in the doorway, his eyes widening as the nightmare scenario unfolds right in front of him. Rona lies on the floor, a pool of crimson spreading beneath her as the life drains from her small body. He rushes to her side, scooping her up with trembling hands, begging her to stay with him. Tears stream down his face as he checks her vitals, relieved to find a faint pulse but terrified by the severity of the wound. His hands are stained with her blood, a stark reminder that he arrived just seconds too late to prevent the blow. Rona's eyes flutter open, and a weak smile touches her lips when she realizes her big brother isn't a ghost. She whispers a faint relief that he's alive, her voice barely audible over the sounds of destruction outside. But her strength fails rapidly, her body going cold in his arms as the light begins to fade from her eyes. Root screams her name, shaking her gently as if he can wake her from the eternal sleep creeping in. Her head lolls back, the spark of life extinguishing as the fatal wound claims its due. Despair threatens to crush him, but the digital interface suddenly flares to life, responding to his overwhelming grief. He screams at the system, demanding it find a path to save her, refusing to let his new power be useless when it matters most. The red screens flash a cruel diagnosis, confirming that standard medical treatment is impossible given her condition. However, the guidepost refuses to accept defeat, calculating a special route that defies the laws of nature. The solution appears in bold text, fusing her fading soul with his own to temporarily extend her existence. Root stares at the prompt, tears blurring his vision as he processes the insane cost of the procedure. The system demands a choice, asking if he is willing to bind their lives together to cheat death. Without a millisecond of hesitation, he roars his acceptance, willing to pay any price to keep his sister in this world. The interface links the process to the Green Dragon magic stone he looted, utilizing its massive energy reserves. The verdant prism activates, the green crystal glowing with a blinding intensity as it prepares to bridge two souls. A pillar of emerald light erupts from the stone, engulfing Rona's body as the forbidden magic begins its work. The emerald light intensifies, swirling around the room as the ancient magic begins to bridge the gap between life and death. Root closes his eyes, and instead of darkness, he is assaulted by a sudden violent torrent of foreign memories. He sees the world through Rona's eyes, witnessing the terrifying moment the monster stampede crashed into their home. Two massive pig-headed beasts loom over him in the vision, representing the absolute helplessness his sister felt in her final moments. The name Marks echoes through the memory, a bitter curse linking the monster attack to the man who orchestrated their misery. The vision descends into brutality, the sound of heavy impacts ringing in his ears as the beasts rampage unchecked. A massive club swings down, a visceral reminder of the pain inflicted on the innocent while the heroes watched. Red flashes of agony spike through the connection, Root feeling every ounce of fear his sister endured during the assault. The aftermath of the violence leaves a stain on his soul, fueling a cold, hard rage that displaces his grief. The memory solidifies the truth. They were used as bait, discarded by the very people sworn to protect them. Back in reality, the red-haired commander carves a path through the remaining monsters in the city square with practiced ease. She barks orders to her troops, securing the perimeter while the civilians scramble for cover behind the line of shields. Her sharp eyes scan the destruction, her duty as a protector never wavering, though she arrived too late for one house. Root emerges from the ruins of his home, the fusion complete and his demeanor terrifyingly calm amidst the rubble. Lillian gasps at the sight of him, noting that while he stands, the ordeal has clearly taken a heavy toll on his spirit. The commander urges him to evacuate to the shelter, unaware that the boy standing there is no longer a helpless civilian. He walks past them without a word, his destination set, leaving the two women confused by his cold shoulder. Lillian tries to stop him, her holographic interface flickering as she senses a dangerous shift in his aura. He finally speaks, his voice void of emotion as he announces he is leaving to settle a score that can't wait. The scene shifts to a rowdy tavern, where a bald adventurer slurps his soup, oblivious to the storm approaching. The patrons discuss the next big target, a legendary shadowless spider known for its invisible deadly webs. Two members of a local party boast about the challenge, their confidence bordering on arrogance as they discuss the hunt. A clumsy young man bumps into the soup drinker while loudly praising Marx's ability to one-shot the beast, because apparently that guy has fanboys everywhere. Root and Lillian enter the establishment, the mage girl shrinking back while Rout scans the room for prey. The bald man stands up, towering over the clumsy kid and demanding to know who is in charge of this noisy circus. The lackeys introduce themselves as the White Wolf's Fang, expecting their guild name to carry enough weight to silence the room. The bald veteran isn't impressed, grabbing the kid and lecturing him on the importance of disciplining his subordinates. The mustache man sweats nervously, realizing the bald guy has no idea he's threatening a psychopath. The young leader smiles, agreeing that discipline is needed, though his eyes promise violence rather than correction. In a blur of motion, he grabs the bald man by the face, lifting the giant off the floor with unnatural strength. The lackeys panic as Root manhandles their bald friend, demanding his release with a mix of fear and bravado. Root obliges, but with enough force to turn the large man into a human projectile. The bald adventurer crashes into his own table, taking the furniture down with him in a heap of wood and groans. The commotion draws out the main attraction as Mark steps forward, bathed in the adoration of his clueless subordinates. Lillian analyzes the energy in the room, realizing the sheer gap in power between the guild leader and a normal mage. Root whispers a plan to her, activating a new system protocol designed specifically to hunt these traitors. The scene shifts to the open road, where the Steel Moon Guild is skipping town in a carriage, unaware of their stowaways. Marx chats casually with his lieutenant, deciding it's time to leave this region after bleeding it dry of resources. His partner asks about the legendary shadowless spider, but Marx scoffs at the idea of risking his neck for glory. He gestures to the hooded figures in the back, joking that they have plenty of fresh cannon fodder if things go south. With a cruel laugh, he mentions collecting the death benefits for the siblings he failed to save, proving his greed knows no bottom. Under the hoods, Root and Lillian sit in silence, listening to the man confess to his crimes with a smile. The carriage enters a narrow ravine, the atmosphere growing heavy as the sunlight struggles to reach the ground. Marx questions the driver about the route, sensing that something is off about this shortcut. Suddenly, the carriage jolts violently, bringing the conversation and the journey to a grinding halt. The Mohawk lackey paws at his face, realizing he's walked into an invisible web that's cutting into his skin. Panic sets in as the invisible threads tighten, trapping the carriage in a deadly net. The vehicle tilts dangerously, sending the passengers tumbling toward the abyss below. High above, the predator descends, a massive arachnid that has been waiting for lunch to deliver itself. The lackeys scream in recognition, realizing they've stumbled directly into the nest of the shadowless spider. The beast hisses, its multiple eyes glowing with the anticipation of a fresh meal. True to his nature, one of the guild members tries to shove the hooded passenger toward the monster to buy time. But the victim doesn't budge, turning to reveal a glare far more terrifying than the spider. Marx freezes, his brain struggling to process the face of the boy he left to die in a collapsing dungeon. Root stands amidst the chaos, his presence commanding the battlefield as the carriage hangs in the balance. A shadow crosses Marx's face as he realizes the dead have returned to haunt him. Root and Lillian step forward, the hunters now cornering the prey in the spider's den. Marx stammers, feigning shock as if he hadn't just been bragging about cashing in their life insurance. Instantly, he switches to his benevolent leader persona, shouting that he's so relieved they survived. But Root and Lillian just stare back, their cold eyes telling him that his acting days are officially over. Marx shrugs off the past, claiming their rookie mistake of betrayal was just a necessary step for the guild's growth. He advances with a twisted logic, suggesting that since their suffering made him rich, he owes them a reward. That reward is a drawn sword, his smile widening as he announces his intent to take their heads. Root stands unmoved, remarking that he's actually relieved to find the man is still a piece of garbage. His expression hardens, declaring that he can now crush them without holding back a single ounce of power. The axe warrior in the carriage decides he's bored of talking and prepares to join the fray. He leaps into action, screaming insults at the bum skill user he plans to bury for good. With a manic laugh, he swings his massive axe, confident that this time there will be no escape. The weapon comes down with lethal force, but the attack is doomed before it even lands. Rout calmly observes that swinging a blade so wildly in this environment is a rookie mistake. The warrior's eyes bulge in shock as his momentum is suddenly arrested by an unseen force. Panic replaces his bravado as he realizes he's entangled in something he can't cut. The invisible trap activates, jerking him violently into the air while Marks watches in confusion. Glowing threads materialize around his body, hoisting him up as the spiders descend to wrap their takeout order. He screams for help while being dragged away, leaving Marks to ask what kind of trickery this is. Root denies doing anything, his eyes glowing with a sinister light as he warns the leader to watch his step. He reveals that the entire ravine is the shadowless spider's hunting ground, layered with invisible tripwires. The deadly web becomes visible around Marks, a poetic justice for the man who loves setting traps. Root's gaze intensifies, the memory of the dungeon betrayal fueling his cold strategy. He screams that this is payment for Rona, his aura flaring with a vengeful red light. The remaining lackeys panic and flee, deciding that fighting spiders is better than facing the angry boy. Marks stands alone amidst the chaos, his sword lowered but his confidence strangely unshaken. He calculates his next move, seemingly unbothered by the fact that his team has just been eaten. Pointing his blade at Root, he acknowledges the cleverness of luring them into a trap within a trap. Rout and Lillian watch him closely, wondering why the man isn't sweating yet. Marks laughs, spreading his arms to mock the situation, asking if Root has prepared anything else. He steps closer to the web, his arrogance acting as a shield against the reality of his position. To twist the knife, he brings up Rona's name, recalling her devotion with a sickeningly patronizing tone. He sneers at the memory of the dead girl, calling her sacrifice pitiful, just to provoke a reaction. Rout stares back with dead eyes, his silence louder than any scream as the villain digs his own grave. Marks covers his face, his laughter echoing with the madness of a man who enjoys cruelty. He taunts Rout, claiming Rona suffered only because she wasn't stupid enough to be easily tricked. Root's answer is silent, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword with white-knuckle intensity. He draws the blade, his stance shifting instantly from a novice guide to a seasoned warrior. Marks mocks the attempt, laughing that a borrowed sword won't help a useless scrub win. But Root's eyes narrow, his mind calculating the counterattack with the precision of a machine. The villain spreads his arms wide, inviting the boy to come and die like a hero. Marks swings down with a roar, screaming that Root's pathetic strength can never avenge his sister. Steel clashes against steel, and Rout parries the heavy blow with a shock of blue sparks. Marks's eyes widen in disbelief, the impact jarring his bones as if he hit a wall. Lillian gasps, unable to comprehend how a non-combatant is blocking a veteran adventurer's strike. Root's gaze remains locked on his target, his focus absolute amidst the chaos of battle. He deflects the blade effortlessly, his movements fluid and practiced, forcing Marks onto the defensive. The villain stumbles back, realizing with horror that the boy's technique rivals a master swordsman. Confusion clouds his mind as he remembers the clumsy amateur who cowered in the dungeon. Root stands ready, the sword in his hand looking less like a tool and more like judgment. He vows to show the murderer true despair, his voice carrying the weight of a death sentence. Marks takes a step back, the confidence draining from his face as fear finally sets in. He grits his teeth, refusing to let a bum humiliate him in front of a ghost. Desperation drives his hand to his pouch, where a stolen artifact pulses with forbidden light. He reveals a jade magic stone, declaring that its power makes him invincible against trash like Root. Root watches calmly, unimpressed by the villain's need to cheat to level the playing field. Blue mana surges around Marks, his body overflowing with energy as he activates the stone. He unleashes a devastating slash, a wave of raw power tearing through the narrow ravine. Lillian screams Root's name, terrified that the massive attack has vaporized him instantly. But Root is already moving, dodging the lethal energy wave with supernatural speed. Marks roars in frustration, swinging wildly as the stone's power turns him into a berserker. A massive shockwave rips through the ground, turning the solid rock into a cloud of dust. Lillian stares wide-eyed at the destruction, realizing the sheer scale of the power being thrown around. Root keeps his distance, realizing a direct hit from that energy would be fatal. Realizing he's outmatched, Marks plays his final dirty card, locking Lillian in a desperate chokehold. He demands Root disable the trap, unaware that the boy's cold gaze holds zero room for negotiation. Internally, the scumbag is already plotting to kill them both the second the webs are down. He presses his blade against her neck, the stolen jade stone glowing at his waist like a lifeline. Desperation cracks his voice as he screams that victory is impossible against his enhanced power. He issues a final ultimatum, threatening to slice her throat if the boy doesn't surrender immediately. Root doesn't flinch, his expression reading the situation with the detachment of an executioner. Suddenly, a dark silhouette manifests from the gloom, interrupting the hostage crisis with lethal intent. Marks freezes, his senses screaming a warning too late as the shadow looms over him. A glowing red visor pierces the darkness, and Marks wonders in terror if they have another ally. He recognizes the form of a Shadow Knight, a summon that shouldn't be possible for a novice. A precise strike sends the Jade Magic Stone flying, severing the villain's connection to his borrowed power. Marks reaches out in horror, watching his invincibility tumble away into the dirt. Root closes the distance in a heartbeat, his eyes burning with the promise of retribution. He delivers a vicious slash across the chest, repaying the traitor in blood. As the man falls, Root whispers that he is finally tasting the same despair he forced on Rona. Marks hits the ground hard, his body broken and his escape route completely cut off. Root ignores the groans of the dying man, his attention shifting to the prize on the floor. He picks up the Jade Magic Stone, reclaiming the artifact that fueled so much misery. Marks looks up through the pain, his eyes widening as he realizes the true horror of his position. The massive, shadowless spider descends from the canopy, ready to claim its meal. The villain's bravado dissolves into pathetic begging, screaming apologies that fall on deaf ears. Root turns his back, leaving the man to the fate he so richly deserves. He coldly remarks that without the stone's protection, the end will be mercifully quick. The spider sinks its fangs into Marks, who spends his final breath threatening them with his brother's wrath. His screams echo through the ravine, a grim soundtrack to the party's departure. Lillian glances back, trembling at the brutality of justice served cold. The monster tears into its prey, silencing the man who thought he could trade lives for gold. More arachnids descend to join the feast, ensuring nothing remains of the Steel Moon leader. Root looks to the sky, whispering to his sister that the first debt has been paid in full. Lillian's scream tears through the ravine as the clicking of 1,000 legs announces the arrival of the swarm. Root remains terrifyingly calm, his eyes locked on the blue holographic data streaming through the air. The system presents the subjugation procedure, turning the chaotic battlefield into a simple checklist for victory. With the traitor dead, Root declares that the appetizer is finished and it's time to squash the main course. The spiders encircle them, a chittering wall of fangs and venom cutting off every possible escape route. Root flashes a confident smirk, assuring the terrified mage that this is just another day at the office. A massive arachnid drops from the canopy, its mandibles dripping with anticipation of a fresh meal. Rout intercepts the beast midair, his sword blurring as he meets the monster's charge head-on. Steel clashes against the creature's carapace, but the spider is far tougher than the standard dungeon trash. Roat frowns, realizing that his current strength isn't enough to pierce their armored hides efficiently. He reaches into his inventory and pulls out the glowing green stone he just looted from Marks's corpse. Lillian gasps at the sight of the stolen artifact, and Rout quips that the previous owner won't be needing it anymore. He activates the Tears of the Emerald Eye, letting the raw mana flood his system to override his limits. Empowered by the stolen energy, he unleashes a slash that tears through the air with renewed ferocity. The blade emits a dark, jagged aura, slicing through the ravine like a rift in reality itself. Rout stands amidst the swirling energy, the power of the stone syncing perfectly with his guide ability. He brings the sword down, the dark energy extending his reach far beyond the physical blade. Lillian watches in awe, shouting his name as he turns the tide of the battle single-handedly. Root explains that the stone was the missing battery needed to download the muscle memory of a master swordsman. He launches himself at the horde, a blur of green and black motion that the spiders can barely track. This time the blade bites deep, exploding the monster's defense in a shower of sparks and fluids. The remaining spiders recoil, their primitive instincts suddenly screaming that the prey has become the predator. But Lillian is overwhelmed on her flank, her defensive spells shattering under the relentless assault. A massive shadow looms over her, a new threat emerging from the darkness while Rout is occupied. A giant bladed leg descends like a guillotine, promising to split the young mage in two. She freezes, death staring her in the face for the second time today. But before the blow lands, a hand made of living shadow materializes from the gloom to intervene. Lillian flinches, expecting pain, but instead feels a strange, cold presence near her face. The shadowy figure gently touches her cheek, a gesture of protection rather than harm. She opens her eyes in confusion, staring at the dark entity that has stepped between her and the abyss. Lillian breathes a sigh of relief, offering a trembling thank you to the dark entity that saved her life. The Shadow Knight stands silent and imposing, its red visor glowing with a menace that is surprisingly comforting. Root steps in front of her, declaring that playtime is over and the real battle is about to begin. As if on cue, the broodmother descends, a massive arachnid nightmare surrounded by her hungry children. Root turns to the mage, telling her he needs her firepower one more time to clear the board. The system interface activates the magic circuit guide, optimizing her mana flow for maximum destruction. Green energy surges around them as he unlocks her limits, ordering her to hit the boss with everything she has. Lillian stammers her agreement, her hands igniting with a magical intensity she didn't know she possessed. She unleashes a massive fireball, the spell roaring toward the cluster of enemies with explosive force. The impact is devastating, engulfing the smaller spiders and the broodmother in a blinding inferno. Lillian cheers for her own success, amazed that she managed to pull off such a powerful attack. Her eyes sparkle with adrenaline, the thrill of victory momentarily overshadowing her fear. But the smoke clears to reveal the broodmother still standing, scorched but very much alive and angry. Panic returns to her face, but Root remains calm, assuring her that this was exactly what he expected. He explains that her job wasn't to kill it, but to burn away the annoying webs and clear out the minions. With the distractions gone, dark energy begins to swirl around his blade as he prepares the finishing move. He focuses his mana, the air vibrating as his sword becomes a conduit for pure destruction. Lillian watches in stunned silence, realizing the boy she thought was a novice is actually a monster in human skin. Root apologizes to the spiders for the genocide, stating that they are simply in the way of his true objective. The broodmother lunges, but Root meets the charge with a wave of dark energy that distorts the air. His eyes lock onto the target, his expression void of mercy as he delivers the final judgment. A vertical slash of purple light tears through the cavern, bisecting the massive beast in a single heartbeat. The monster splits apart, its reign of terror ending with a wet thud against the canyon floor. Lillian stares at the corpse, her mind struggling to process how he just one-shot an A-rank calamity. She calculates the fame and fortune such a feat would bring, realizing he could be a hero in the city. But Root turns his back on the glory, walking away into the shadows without a second glance. He tells her he won't be returning to civilization, as his path lies elsewhere and his work isn't done. Kneeling by the carcass, he retrieves the true prize of this hunt, ignoring the gold value of the monster parts. He holds up a pulsing purple stone, an artifact capable of erasing a person's presence from the world. Lillian gasps, recognizing the legendary Purple Shadow Stone, a treasure worth more than entire kingdoms. Lillian realizes the spiders use the stone's unique properties to create their deadly invisible threads. Rout pockets the gem, stating it's his ticket to meeting the only healer capable of saving Rona. He drops the name of their destination, Verdant, the legendary Witch of the World Tree. Lillian freezes, the color draining from her face at the mere mention of that name. She drops a bombshell of her own, revealing that the terrifying witch is actually her mother. The revelation hangs heavy in the air as they stand amidst the canyon walls. Lillian trembles, warning him that her mother is a monster who never lends power to anyone. She begs him to reconsider, desperate to find any other route than facing that woman. Root shakes his head, explaining that his guide has calculated millions of paths, and they all converge on Verdant. The absolute certainty in his eyes shuts down her argument before it can start. He thanks her for her help, but decides to cut ties here to spare her the family reunion. Turning to leave, he attempts to shoulder the burden alone, just as he always has. But a hand clamps onto his arm, stopping him in his tracks. Lillian begs him not to leave her behind, revealing that she needs his strength to save her sister. Her desperation mirrors his own, proving that they are both fighting for family. The scene shifts to a peaceful carriage ride, though the tension in the air remains thick. Lillian wonders internally why she's such a pushover, while Root smiles like a man with a plan. He thanks her again, noting that her bloodline is the only key that will unlock the World Tree's door. But the question remains, why is the daughter of a goddess terrified to go home? The wheels turn rhythmically as Root asks what exactly she is so afraid of. He offers her silence, but she chooses to speak, her voice trembling with old scars. She explains that Verdant bore 3 daughters from the World Tree to serve as her successors. 3 children were born into greatness, but talent was not distributed equally. The eldest, Alvira, was born a master of mana, commanding storms before she could walk. The second, Floria, mastered the art of soulcraft, creating armies of golems with a thought. Root nods, recognizing the names of these legendary witches from tavern rumors. Lillian shrinks in her seat, admitting she is the runt of the litter with barely enough mana to light a candle. A flashback drags us back 2 years, showing the grim reality of life at the World Tree. Instead of a princess, Lillian was treated like a glorified maid, fetching wine for her superior siblings. She stumbles in her haste, falling at the feet of a massive creature while trying to serve her tormentors. The eldest sister, Elvira, snaps her fingers, demanding service with the arrogance of a queen addressing a rat. Lillian rushes forward, apologizing profusely while trying to balance the tray in her fear. Floria interjects with a warm smile, telling her little sister she doesn't need to act like a servant. The wine flows smoothly into the glass, a luxury enjoyed while their sibling suffers. A wooden automaton handles the pouring, performing the task with the mechanical perfection Elvira adores. The eldest sister takes a sip, noting with a sneer that even a block of wood is more useful than Lillian. Her gaze sharpens into a glare, wishing the failure would just hurry up and cease to exist. Floria clasps Lillian's hands, her voice dripping with honey as she tells her to ignore the cruelty. Lillian looks up with teary eyes, grateful to have at least one sibling who treats her like a human. But the smile twists into something predatory as Floria assigns her the critical role of durability tester. The betrayal hits harder than a slap, Lillian's face freezing as she realizes she's just lab equipment. Floria drags her outside with cheerful force, eager to see if her sister breaks before the golem does. A massive stone fist blots out the sun, signaling the start of the experiment. Lillian screams as the construct prepares to flatten her into the garden soil. The impact shakes the earth, dust flying as the golem misses its target by a hair's breadth. She curls up in the dirt, sobbing and asking why her own blood would do this to her. Floria explains that isolation breeds boredom and witches need to test their creations somehow. Perched atop another machine, she treats the life-or-death struggle below as mild entertainment. She cheerfully warns that the golem has no restraint settings, so survival is entirely optional. The machine attacks again, and Lillian's scream pierces the air as she dodges death. She scrambles away like a frightened animal, the massive construct relentless in its pursuit. Cornered, she unleashes a fireball, throwing every ounce of her weak mana into the spell. The explosion blooms against the stone chest, a flash of orange that looks impressive for a second. But the smoke clears to reveal the golem marching forward without a scratch, mocking her effort. Elvira watches from a throne, yawning as she wonders if the golem is strong or Lillian is just pathetic. A heavy blow connects, sending the young mage sprawling across the grass in agony. Elvira's eyes light up with sadism, and she begs to tag in for a turn at the punching bag. Floria refuses, worried that her sister's nukes would destroy the expensive golem, not the girl. Lillian fires again, her resistance futile against the overwhelming gap in power. Elvira sneers at the flames, disgusted that a daughter of the World Tree is limited to such weak magic. The massive stone hand crashes down, kicking up a cloud of dust where the girl used to be. But the escape is short-lived as the golem snatches her out of the air, its grip tight and unforgiving. She struggles against the stone fingers, screaming for mercy that isn't coming. Elvira decides she's bored of watching and charges in, eager to test her own destructive power on the target. Her face twists with manic glee as she summons a high-level lightning spirit to obliterate everything in sight. A bolt of blue lightning crashes down, engulfing both the construct and her sister in a blinding flash of voltage. The impact sends Lillian flying like a rag doll, her body skidding across the grass from the force of the blast. Smoke rises from the charred golem, which stands motionless but surprisingly intact after taking a direct hit. Floria immediately complains, not about her sister's safety, but about the potential damage to her precious toy. Elvira scoffs, annoyed that her fun is being interrupted by such petty concerns. The blonde sister maintains her gentle facade, though her eyes remain closed to the violence she just witnessed. A dark, oppressive aura begins to leak from the eldest, signaling that the real authority has arrived to spoil the party. Floria freezes, her smile faltering as she realizes their mother is watching the chaos unfold. The Witch of the World Tree appears, her voice calm but carrying a terrifying weight as she scolds them for making a mess. Floria quickly bows, promising to scrub the garden clean if it means avoiding punishment. The matriarch's gaze shifts to the debris, her eyes cold and calculating as she assesses the failure. She dismisses the broken golem as junk, but her next words cut deeper than any blade. With a casual wave of her hand, she orders them to dispose of Lillian along with the rubble, labeling her own daughter as garbage. Lillian lies broken on the ground, hearing the woman who gave her life demand that she be discarded like waste. The physical pain is nothing compared to the heart-shattering realization that she has no place in this family. The massive world tree looms overhead, a silent witness to the cruelty as the matriarch enforces the eviction. Elvira floats above with a smug grin, while Floria uses her magic to telekinetically lift her sister for disposal. There is no resistance left in her as she is tossed aside, her existence erased from the sanctuary of the forest. Floria offers one last look, her expression a chilling mix of pity and relief that the weak link is gone. But the cruelty isn't over, as the kind sister suggests one final use for the exile before she leaves. Lillian looks up in confusion, wondering what else they could possibly take from her. Floria reveals her true nature, admitting she's always wanted to see what happens when a human soul is stuffed into a monster. A grotesque pink blob creature emerges from the woods, its multiple eyes locking onto the defenseless girl. The beast opens a maw filled with razor-sharp teeth, ready to consume the research material. Floria frames the consumption as a favor, because nothing says sisterly love like feeding your sibling to a blob. Lillian presses her face into the dirt, begging for salvation as the shadow of the monster falls over her. Her body trembles uncontrollably, the terror of being eaten alive compounded by the heartbreak of abandonment. The pink monstrosity opens its jaws to feed, while in the distance her sisters walk away without a single backward glance. Floria lets out a heavy sigh, looking more inconvenienced by the delay than the fact that she just sentenced her sister to death. Elvira decides she's bored of the show, calling out for Floria to leave the trash to its fate. With a cruel sneer, Floria frames her betrayal as a twisted kindness, scolding Lillian for not appreciating the opportunity. The two witches vanish toward the world tree, leaving their sibling to be erased from the family tree permanently. As they stroll away, Floria muses that Lillian would have made a decent golem part, already planning her next experiment with Elvira. Left alone in the silence of the forest, Lillian weeps, waiting for the end that feels inevitable. The flashback fades, returning to the carriage where Root pieces together the mystery of the Shadow Knight. He explains that Rona's ability, Shadow User, was always dismissed by society as a useless parlor trick. Lillian nods in agreement, admitting that in a world of high-explosive magic, playing with silhouettes seems painfully weak. But Root reveals that his guide skill unlocked the hidden text of the ability, showing it was never limited to simple shapes. He clutches his chest, feeling the connection to the soul he carries, realizing the potential she never got to explore. The true power of the skill is imagination. A shadow can become anything the user has the mental fortitude to visualize. He reveals that the lethal knight protecting them is modeled after his late father, a swordsman whose strength he admired. A bittersweet thought crosses his mind that Rona could have done this too, had her gentle heart been capable of imagining such violence. By combining his tactical commands with the shadow construct, he created an autonomous guardian that fights on his behalf. Lillian marvels at the synergy, but Root admits there's a catch. He didn't inherit the full power of the original skill. Confused, she asks the million-gold question, what exactly is Guide, if it can do all this? Root opens his mouth to explain the cheat code that is his life, but the conversation is cut short by a sudden tremor. His eyes snap open, the passive radar in his head screaming a warning before his ears even hear the threat. A massive great horn bursts from the foliage, deciding that a carriage looks like a chew toy. The beast's eyes glow with aggression, its horn lowered for a charge that will turn their transport into splinters. Root shoves Lillian out of the danger zone, declaring that this interruption is actually perfect timing. He draws his sword and lures the beast away, turning the ambush into a live demonstration. Digital particles surround him as he prepares to show her that Guide isn't just a GPS, it's a walkthrough for reality. The system interface locks onto the Great Horn, generating a step-by-step tutorial on how to dismantle the creature. Root's expression shifts to cold focus, his body moving before the monster even commits to its attack. The rhino charges with the momentum of a freight train, unaware that its movements have already been predicted. Rout analyzes the beast, noting its specialty is turning intruders into kebabs with that massive horn. He stands his ground, aware that the monster's hide is thick enough to laugh off standard steel. The great horn roars, its eyes glowing red as it commits fully to the charge. But Root isn't worried, his interface revealing that the creature's attack pattern is as straight as a ruler. He sidesteps at the last second, letting the massive bulk thunder past him with inches to spare. Activating Shadow User, he summons a dark construct to reinforce his next move. The system highlights the target, and Rout strikes the beast's forelegs with surgical precision. He explains that once the train has left the station, it can't change tracks mid-charge. The blade connects with a heavy impact, disrupting the monster's momentum instantly. By taking out the legs during a sprint, physics does the rest of the work for him. The beast's face meets the dirt, its massive weight working against it in a spectacular crash. Lillian watches with her mouth open, stunned that a guide is manhandling a tank-class monster. The great horn flips over, its unstoppable charge turning into a clumsy tumble. Root watches the fall, his prediction playing out exactly as the blue windows promised. Dust flies as the creature exposes its underbelly, completely helpless. Root raises his sword, noting that while the back is armored, the stomach is soft as a pillow. He drives the blade down, piercing the weak point and ending the fight in a single stroke. With the threat neutralized, he turns back to Lillian with a smile, offering to finally explain his cheat code. Lillian nods eagerly, realizing there is way more to this boy than just reading maps. He reveals that swallowing the Ravenwing magic stone in the dungeon triggered a massive evolution in his skill. The guide ability didn't just get better, it fundamentally changed how he perceives reality. Suddenly, the forest is filled with floating blue screens, visualizing the ocean of data he sees every second. He explains that the evolution unlocked a flood of information, turning the world into a solvable equation. He points to her earlier success, revealing that the magic circuit guide optimized her mana flow manually. Lillian realizes her devastating fireball wasn't a fluke, but a result of his direct intervention. But Root shakes his head, clarifying that he can't create power, only unlock what's already sleeping inside. He looks her in the eye, telling her that the destructive potential she fears is actually her birthright as an archmage's daughter. Standing amidst the digital lights, he assures her that she isn't useless. She's a powerhouse waiting to happen. Tears prick her eyes, the validation hitting harder than any spell as she finally feels seen. As they resume their journey, Root confirms he has a plan to save everyone, but warns that his power isn't as omnipotent as it seems. Root clarifies that his skill isn't just a map, but a prophetic analysis tool that predicts the future. Lillian blinks, trying to wrap her head around the idea of a power that essentially reads the script of reality. He explains that it subconsciously processes environmental data, like when he unlocked her magic during the spider fight. It acts like an oracle, guiding him to the perfect solution while managing his new resource, the tears of the Emerald Eye. Later by the fire, the mood turns serious as Rout admits that while the witch is their only hope, there are no guarantees. He looks at her with intensity, emphasizing that her bloodline is the key to opening the door that could save his sister. Lillian clenches her fists, vowing to help him no matter the cost, since he's the first person to ever value her life. Root offers a genuine smile, thanking her for her courage in facing the demons of her past. The next day brings a change of scenery, Lillian pointing out the massive silhouette dominating the horizon. The World Tree stands tall in the distance, a colossal landmark that marks the end of their journey. Its leaves glow with ethereal light, a beautiful beacon that hides the cruel family drama waiting at its roots. Rout estimates the travel time, noting that the sheer scale of the tree messes with their depth perception, but his internal radar suddenly pings, an exclamation mark flashing in his mind as danger disrupts the peace. He spots a plume of black smoke rising nearby, signaling that someone is having a very bad day. Lillian follows his gaze, her face paling as she realizes the fire is coming from a nearby settlement. They arrive to find a village under siege by a bizarre, three-eyed golem that clearly woke up and chose violence. The creature is a grotesque blob of flesh and stone, its tentacled mouth and dead yellow eyes looking like a nightmare. Two local defenders stand their ground, a swordsman and a mage desperate to hold the line against the invader. The golem raises a massive fist, threatening to flatten the quaint architecture and anyone standing in front of it. The swordsman leaps into the fray, bravery outweighing common sense as he challenges the giant. He swings his blade with a shout, hoping a sharp piece of metal is enough to stop a walking boulder. The monster's eyes widen slightly, though it looks more confused by the mosquito bite than hurt. The attack connects, but the golem just stares back, its massive fist ready to deliver a receipt for the scratch. The warrior lands, realizing with a sinking feeling that his best shot didn't even chip the paint. His partner follows up with a fireball, blasting the creature in the face with a direct hit of magical flame. She pours her mana into the spell, praying that fire is the answer to their rock-hard problem. The swordsman watches the smoke, asking the universal question of every hero who just used a smokescreen. He squints through the haze, hoping to see a pile of rubble instead of a standing enemy. But the smoke clears to reveal the golem completely unharmed, its lips pursed as if mocking their puny efforts. Root watches from the sidelines, his analysis confirming that standard attacks are useless against a foe designed to tank them. The bizarre, egg-shaped monstrosity charges forward, its tentacled mouth twitching with hunger. Root pulls Lillian behind cover, assuring her that despite its speed, he has the situation under control. The creature lunges with terrifying reach, its massive hands grasping for anything to crush. Root moves like a phantom, his blade flashing as he weaves through the clumsy attack. With a single, precise strike, he slices through the creature's torso, expecting it to crumble. The top half slides off, revealing a hollow interior filled with writhing tentacles instead of organs. But the monster refuses to die, its limbs regenerating and lashing out with renewed fury. Root dances away from the strike, realizing this isn't just a monster, it's a puppet. A voice echoes from the beast, praising his agility and noting he would make excellent raw material. Root's expression remains flat, unimpressed by the creepy recruitment pitch. He delivers another slash, quipping that he outgrew playing with dolls a long time ago. Lillian screams a warning as the creature prepares a counterattack that defies physics. A beam of energy erupts from the golem, forcing Root to abandon his offense and scramble for safety. He sprints across the cobblestones, the relentless egg monster hot on his heels. Suddenly, the creature stops and collapses into a pile of dust, its purpose apparently served. From the remains of the golem, a woman rises like a goddess emerging from a shell. Floria smiles brightly, greeting her terrified little sister with a cheerfulness that chills the blood. She skips toward Lillian, who is frozen in place by the trauma of seeing her tormentor again. Floria leans in close, asking if Lillian came back just to see her, feigning overwhelming joy. She apologizes for their past misunderstandings, claiming she has spent every day thinking about her sister. Her face twists into a demonic grin as she whispers that she can now turn Lillian into an even better golem.
Seeing Lillian's horror, she pulls back with a giggle, claiming it was just a harmless joke.
She continues her twisted monologue, lamenting the day Lillian escaped their happy home. Holding the trembling girl, she insists that her regret is genuine and deep. But the regret isn't for hurting her, it's for letting a failure embarrass the family name in public. Her fingers dig into Lillian's skin as she whispers that she should have just killed her back then. A steel blade suddenly interrupts the family reunion, hovering inches from the witch's face. Floria doesn't even blink, her eyes shifting to the intruder who dared to crash her party. Rout stands between them, his sword steady as he declares they have no time for her twisted games. Floria smiles condescendingly, wondering why anyone would waste their precious time protecting trash. Lillian stammers a tearful apology, her trauma resurfacing in the presence of her sister. Root reassures her, declaring that anyone blind to her value is simply incompetent. Floria bristles at the insult, demanding to know who he's calling a bad judge. She summons a massive round golem, letting her magic do the talking. Root raises his sword, unfazed by the giant rock looming over him. The construct swings a heavy limb, but Rout dodges the clumsy attack easily. He stares her down, reminding her that she isn't even a challenge. Floria laughs, bragging that her creations can be revived endlessly. The rubble shifts and reforms, proving her minions are effectively immortal. Root activates his guide, severing the mana flow to permanently disable the construct. Floria's smug smile vanishes as her invincible puppet crumbles into inert dust. Rout dismisses her games, while she screams in frustration at his interference. His eyes sharpen, sensing a massive spike in mana approaching rapidly. A giant stone fist crashes down, shattering the street where they just stood. They scramble through the debris, barely staying ahead of the destruction. Floria giggles, promising to have her adorable pets grind them into paste. A towering golem emerges, its gaping maw revealing a pulsing pink core. The beast smashes the ground, its size making it a far deadlier threat. Lillian asks for a disable, but Root admits this one is too big. He turns to her, declaring that he needs her firepower to win. He orders her to unleash her strongest spell as they face the giant. But the core reveals a horrific secret, a human knight trapped inside. Rout shouts for her to wait, realizing they can't just destroy it. He glares at Floria, disgusted by her poor taste in using living batteries. Floria beams, claiming she is merciful for giving these people a purpose. She insists that becoming her puppet is the greatest happiness they could find. Lillian freezes, recognizing the victim inside as her sister's twisted hobby comes to life. Root charges in, planning to rescue the hostage before Lillian fires. But panic seizes the mage. Terrified, she lacks the power to cast alone. The young witch cries out in terror that she can't cast such a powerful spell on her own. Root launches himself into the air, aiming straight for the monstrosity's open maw. Dark energy cloaks his movements, his blade becoming a shadow that slips past the golem's defenses. With surgical precision, he severs the connections binding the hostage to the core. He strikes hard, creating an opening to extract the human battery before the creature can react. Root grabs the knight and dives away, screaming for Lillian to blow the empty shell to kingdom come. But the girl freezes, her eyes wide with terror as the trauma of her past locks her muscles. She clutches her head, sobbing that she can't do it, paralyzed by the fear of failure. The golem's chest cavity writhes with pink tentacles, angry that its power source has been stolen. Root sprints to safety with the unconscious knight, leaving the monster vulnerable for the kill shot. He shouts at the mage, urging her to remember the flow of mana she controlled in the dungeon. Floria bursts into laughter, mocking the idea that a piece of trash could ever be useful. Root ignores the taunts, yelling that she wields the power of a great archmage and needs to use it now. The encouragement pierces her panic, and Lillian stands up, trembling but ready to defy her fate. Floria sneers, telling the failure to know her place and stop embarrassing the family. But Lillian snaps, tears streaming down her face as she screams that she is not trash. Mana erupts around her, igniting the air as she begins the chant for a high-level destruction spell. Her eyes glow with blue fire, calling upon the violent inferno to answer her rage. Root watches the energy gather, realizing she has finally stepped into her potential as a mage. Floria's smug expression vanishes, replaced by shock as she senses the overwhelming power building up. Lillian unleashes the spell, commanding the flames to burn it all and scorch the earth to ash. A massive flame breath roars from her hands, turning the street into a tunnel of fire. The blast slams into the golem, the sheer heat vaporizing the stone construct in an instant. The explosion shakes the village, a testament to the raw power the girl had been hiding all along. Lillian pants heavily, the adrenaline crash hitting her as the flames die down. Her gaze hardens, the weak girl who cowered in the dirt replaced by someone new. She stands defiant in the glow of the fire, vowing never to let anyone degrade her again. The smoke clears to reveal Floria, her dress fluttering in the heat waves, looking absolutely livid. She grits her teeth, her composure cracking as she realizes her toy has been obliterated. Staring at the dark silhouette of Root's guardian, she demands to know what the hell is going on. Root explains that this devastation is Lillian's true power, which her fear had been suppressing until now. Root reveals that her immense power was suppressed not because she was weak, but to prevent a catastrophic meltdown. Lillian stares in shock, realizing her entire life of being called trash was based on a safety measure she never knew about. Floria screams for them to shut up, her composure cracking as she demands they stop flapping their gums. She rants that as the big sister, her word is law, and if she calls Lillian trash, then trash she is. Lillian finally snaps back, shouting her sister's name to cut through the verbal abuse. The two sisters face off in the street, the dynamic shifting for the first time in their lives. Lillian begs her to stop, declaring with a trembling voice that she is no longer anyone's doll. Floria stares in disbelief as Lillian asserts that she stands here by her own choice, not because she was discarded. She draws a line in the sand, warning Floria that she will show no mercy to anyone who blocks her path, even family. Floria turns her back, a glowing light gathering in her hand as she goes silent. Suddenly, she spins around with a bright smile, apologizing for losing her cool in a complete personality 180. She beams with fake pride, telling Lillian how overjoyed she is to see her little sister grow a spine. Lillian blinks, her guard lowering slightly as she whispers her sister's name, desperate for approval. But the mask slips instantly as Floria transforms her arm into a grotesque claw, promising to tear her apart and rebuild her as a golem. She lunges with a manic laugh, the sisterly love replaced by a desire to turn her sibling into a puppet. Her face twists into pure madness, the joy of violence shining in her eyes. Root steps in, his sword raised to intercept the blow as he shouts for Lillian to get ready. Lillian stammers her agreement, fear warring with determination as she prepares to fight back. Root declares they are taking her down, his blade acting as the shield Lillian never had. She nods, sweat dripping down her face as she forces herself to trust in his plan. Floria laughs at their defiance, her arms now fully transformed into massive stone claws. She leaps into the air, mocking their confidence just because they broke a few of her toys. The giant claw comes crashing down, a heavy strike meant to flatten them into the pavement. Root and Lillian scatter, barely evading the impact that cracks the stone street. Rout signals the timing, shouting for her to unleash her magic right now. Lillian screams the incantation, firing a massive fireball directly at her sister. The spell connects, exploding in a brilliant flash of orange flames that engulfs the target. Lillian cheers, convinced that a direct hit like that must have ended the fight. But Floria emerges from the smoke without a scratch, looking bored by the light show. Lillian panics as the attack fails, but Rout calmly replies that damaging her wasn't the plan. The fireball was merely a flashbang, masking the Shadow Knight's approach as it delivers a dishonorable strike from the rear. Its red visor gleams with cold intent, executing Rout's command to hit the witch while she's blinded. Floria stumbles, engulfed in a sudden eruption of black smoke that disorients her completely. The ground beneath her dissolves into a swirling vortex, a shadow trap designed to swallow her whole. She thrashes in the darkness, screaming in confusion as the void drags her down like quicksand. The shadows tighten around her, burying the witch in a temporary prison while Rout makes his move. But the trap isn't strong enough to hold her, and she bursts free, furious to find the street empty. She stands amidst the dissipating smoke, her annoyance growing as she realizes her prey has engaged in a tactical retreat. Her scream shatters the silence, demanding the cowards show themselves so she can dismantle them properly. Rout and Lillian are crouched behind a crate, the guide checking his interface while assuring her that everything is on schedule. He watches the timer tick down, whispering that they just need to stay hidden for a few more seconds. Floria leaps onto the rooftop, scanning the village with predatory eyes, convinced they are cowering nearby. She sneers at the empty streets, mocking Lillian for picking a boyfriend who specializes in running away. Perched high above, she vows to gouge out Rout's eyes as a souvenir once she finds him. Turning her back, she monologues about the superiority of mindless golems, unaware she's no longer the only hunter in town. A streak of blue light interrupts her speech, whistling through the air with lethal precision. The projectile slams into the roof, the impact shockwave catching her completely off guard. Floria loses her footing, tumbling from her perch with a startled grunt as gravity claims its due. Lillian gasps, recognizing the newcomers as the Royal Capital Knight Order, finally arriving to save their comrade. The white-haired Knight Root rescued lies safe in the alley, the living evidence that brought the cavalry running. A squad of elite soldiers stands in formation, their weapons drawn and eyes locked on the monster. The squad leader barks a confirmation, identifying the target as the Witch of Creation and ordering the attack. Floria sits up, plucking an arrow from her forehead like it's a stray hair, seemingly more annoyed than injured. A blonde mage in the rear guard begins a chant, gathering golden energy between his palms. He casts Enchant Flame Emperor, a massive buff spell that ignites the weapons of the entire unit. The archer's arrows burst into magical flames, their resolve hardening as they prepare to face a legend. They draw their bowstrings in unison, aiming high to rain destruction down on the enemy. The commander screams the order to fire, unleashing a volley of burning justice. The sky lights up as dozens of enchanted arrows arc downward, converging on the witch's position. Floria raises her massive stone arms to shield herself, bracing for impact as the bombardment slams into her. A knight charges his blade with the crackling energy of a Thunder Emperor enchantment, eager to join the fray. Floria scoffs at the audacity of mere humans challenging her, her stone claws twitching with irritation. Rout's interface updates with a new objective, instructing him to use the chaos as a diversion and let the army handle the heavy lifting. The soldier lunges forward, his electrified blade carving a path of golden light through the air. He strikes with the force of a thunderbolt, aiming to shatter the witch's stone defenses. Floria groans at the nuisance, her lower body erupting into a mass of writhing tentacles to swat the flies away. The stone limbs lash out violently, forcing the attackers to scramble or be crushed into paste. A precise blue slash cuts through the chaos, severing the construct's limbs before they can connect. The blonde commander lowers her weapon, sensing that the entity they just fought was merely a puppet, not the real witch. As if to confirm her suspicion, the stone body loses its cohesion and crumbles into a pile of lifeless rubble. She grips her sword, shaken by the realization that a mere clone possessed such monstrous strength. It makes no sense for the reclusive Witch of Creation to descend from her sanctuary just to terrorize a human village. She informs her lieutenant that reports of attacks from both the Storm and Creation Witches have been flooding in from nearby towns. They stand over the remains of the decoy, the pieces of the puzzle refusing to fit together. Her instincts scream that something is fundamentally wrong with the behavior of the World Tree's guardians. While the witches are known for their volatile tempers, unprovoked aggression against distant settlements is out of character. Their ancient pact dictates they only unleash their wrath upon those foolish enough to trespass on the World Tree's roots. The massive tree looming in the distance is a treasure trove of resources that could revolutionize mankind. Rout and Lillian listen from the shadows as the knights discuss the endless parade of adventurers seeking their fortune there. Rumors speak of miraculous herbs growing in its shade, capable of feats that defy medical science. Rout's ears perk up at the mention of a cure for any disease, his mind instantly going to the sister he saved. But the commander's voice turns grim as she reminds them that the prize is guarded by the deadliest women on the continent. The witches of the World Tree stand as absolute gatekeepers, their power dwarfing that of any human army. They are the nightmares of the forest, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Every expedition that dared to challenge them has ended in a gruesome display of nature reclaiming the intruders. The lieutenant recites the local wisdom. Admire the tree from afar, for approaching it is a death sentence. As long as humanity keeps its distance, the terror sleeping within the roots remains dormant. Hidden in an alley, Lillian confirms that her mother strictly forbade them from ever descending to the human realm. The presence of her sister Floria in a human town violates every rule she was raised to obey. Root realizes the internal order of the World Tree has collapsed, while the knights prepare to wage war to rescue their lost comrade. Rout carries the unconscious survivor to the feet of the blonde commander, who identifies him as her missing man, Alsace. Healing magic bathes the fallen knight, knitting his wounds as the squad watches with bated breath. A groan escapes his lips, the first sign of life returning to a man who was essentially a battery. The commander asks for a status report, her relief palpable as he confirms he's still in one piece. He sits up, shame coloring his voice as he admits he was captured by the Witch of Creation. His gaze shifts to Root and Lillian, a flicker of recognition sparking in his eyes from his time inside the monster. He introduces himself as Alsace, extending a hand to the strangers who pulled him out of hell. Rout introduces himself and his companion, keeping it brief since they're technically fugitives or at least suspicious. Alsace turns back to his captain, confirming the grim reality. The witches are actively hunting the investigation team. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, a purple-haired witch stares down with disdain at the latest catch of the day. Elvira, the eldest sister, inspects a grotesque bottle containing a trapped female knight suspended in pink fluid. Floria skips over with a smile, explaining she picked up this stray from a nearby village like it's a lost puppy. The armor identifies the victim as a member of the Royal Army's elite investigation team, a direct provocation of war. Floria plays the airhead card, claiming ignorance of politics while standing next to a war crime. The narration shifts to the royal capital, the glittering heart of humanity that the witches view with contempt. Elvira spits on the idea of human authority, predicting that the army will inevitably march on their forest. Floria's eyes light up at the prospect, seeing an invading army as nothing more than a delivery of fresh golem parts. Elvira floats near the massive roots, warning her sister that the royal army is a pest that's hard to exterminate. She turns her gaze upward, calling out to the massive entity fused with the bark for guidance. But the Witch of the World Tree remains silent, her face frozen in an eternal floral slumber. Elvira's expression twists, clearly tired of talking to a silent guardian. She shouts at her mother, frustrated that groaning is the only advice they've received in years. The matriarch offers no answer, her consciousness seemingly lost within the wood she protects. Her body is fully integrated into the trunk, a prisoner of her own duty to the forest. Floria touches the bark, noting sadly that while the outside is majestic, the core is rotting away. Elvira floats freely, casually suggesting they abandon the dying tree and go conquer the human capital instead. Floria gasps in mock horror, reminding her sister of the sacred vow they swore to their mother. Elvira laughs, the sound echoing with the madness of someone who has long since stopped caring about rules. The ancient law echoes in the background. Stay in the forest, avoid conflict, or risk burning everything down. Floria recites the mission with a smile, though her actions suggest she's just as twisted as her sister. Elvira snaps at her sister, asking if they are doomed to rot in this forest forever like prisoners. She declares with venom that she would rather die than continue this stagnant, pointless existence. Floria vents her own frustration on the landscape, smashing a tree with a glowing, mana-infused punch. Elvira looks surprised as Floria suddenly recites their sacred duty to watch over the World Tree. But Floria's face twists into a sinister grin, noting that the pact only applies as long as the tree is actually healthy. She proposes a horrific solution: kill everyone in the capital and use the city as a fresh vessel for new roots. Elvira's eyes light up with manic delight, finally hearing a plan that matches her thirst for destruction. Inside a golem core, a captured female knight struggles against her paralysis, desperate to warn her comrades. Elvira realizes the army is coming and decides to launch a preemptive strike to wipe them out first. Floria looks dreamy at the thought of war, seeing the invading soldiers as nothing more than raw materials for her collection. A bizarre, potato-shaped monstrosity waddles into view, ready to serve as the vanguard of their twisted army. Floria hops onto her mount, stretching casually as she remembers she has one loose end left to tie up. A massive dragon golem roars to life, and Floria decides it's time to finish off her little sister along with the soldiers. The witches mobilize their grotesque forces, marching toward the capital with smiles on their faces. The trapped knight watches helplessly from her prison, her mind screaming a warning that no one can hear. Back in town, Root shares the grim intelligence with the commander. The world tree is rotting from the inside out. The commander realizes they are out of time and orders an immediate surprise attack before the enemy can dig in. Rout steps forward with Lillian, asking to join the vanguard despite their civilian status. He insists they can help, his eyes burning with a determination that goes beyond mere duty. The commander exchanges a glance with Alsace, weighing the risk of bringing 2 kids into a war zone. She shakes Rout's hand, welcoming them to the squad and validating their strength. The group sets off toward the towering silhouette of the World Tree, the final dungeon awaiting them. Rout's mind races with the stakes, knowing that if the tree falls, his sister's life support fails with it. He clenches his fist, refusing to accept a bad ending when he has the power to rewrite the script. He checks on Lillian, asking if she's holding up okay as they march toward her nightmare. Lillian nods, terrified but resolute, stating that meeting her mother Verdana is their only priority. The commander rallies the troops, ordering a forced march to catch the witches off guard. They charge toward destiny, making a direct course for the World Tree to save the world, and one little girl. The orange-haired witch anxiously asks the young man how he's holding up, while he says they'll temporarily join the group and must first meet Verdana. The determined Commander Archer declares that the party will immediately head straight for the World Tree before the witches have time to prepare, while the witch behind him follows in shock. Lillian suggests a pit stop, worried that the half-day trek will drain them before the fight even starts. But the blonde commander has a better idea, raising a hand to cast Enchant Thunder Emperor over the entire squad. A massive magic circle descends, bathing Root and Lillian in a blinding golden light. The captain explains that she has imbued them with lightning magic, doubling their travel speed instantly. Lillian marvels at the sensation, sparks dancing around her as her body feels lighter than air. Root examines the energy coating his hand, realizing this is a high-level support spell usually reserved for elites. He calculates the benefits, noting that this massive buff gives them a serious tactical advantage. The commander cuts the chatter, ordering Root to explain his situation while they move, since time is a luxury they don't have. The squad takes off, blurring through the forest like a streak of green lightning. Rout spins a tragic backstory on the fly, claiming they are exiles wandering the world after losing their home. He blames a dungeon break for their misfortune, painting a picture of helpless victims seeking purpose. He adds that they rushed over the moment they heard the witches were causing trouble, framing their presence as noble. Root plays the gratitude card, thanking the commander for saving Alsace to cement their alliance. The commander brushes off the praise, focused entirely on the mission ahead as they tear through the landscape. Lillian runs silently, relieved the cover story is holding, since admitting she's the villain's daughter is a bad icebreaker. The white-haired knight, Alsace, pulls up beside her, asking how she and Rout know each other. Lillian stammers a vague excuse about traveling together, trying not to look as guilty as she feels. Alsace smiles innocently, noting that she bears a striking resemblance to the very witches they are hunting. Lillian's heart stops, her face twisting in panic as the knight accidentally hits the bullseye. Root glances back in alarm as Alsace laughs it off, unaware he just nearly gave the poor girl a heart attack. But the awkward interrogation is cut short as Rout screams a warning, his eyes locking onto the sky. A mechanical D-dragon dives from the clouds, a winged construct sent to intercept the intruders. The commander identifies it as a witch's weapon, ordering her squad to switch from running to killing. The dragon roars, preparing to strafe the ground, while the archers ready their bows with practiced discipline. They switch elements instantly, casting Enchant Ice Emperor to counter the beast's fiery nature. The dragon opens its maw, unleashing a torrent of flames meant to incinerate the entire squad. The commander screams the order, and a volley of freezing arrows streaks upward to meet the fire. Ice meets fire in a violent collision, the magical energies struggling for dominance in the sky. The dragon bursts through the steam, its metallic body glowing from the heat of the exchange. Lillian cheers for a direct hit, but Root's sharp eyes see what she missed. The monster isn't stopping. The mechanical beast ignores the ice, unleashing a second wave of scorching breath that threatens to melt the front line. One of the knights sees a gap in the flames and decides to play hero, charging in for a decapitation strike. He lunges with everything he has, convinced that the dragon's neck is exposed and vulnerable. But Rout screams a warning, his guide skill flashing a red alert that the soldier is running into a trap. The knight freezes mid-swing, realizing too late that the threat isn't the dragon in front of him. A massive, fleshy claw swipes in from the blind spot, hitting him with the force of a wrecking ball. The impact sends him flying across the clearing, his armor crumpling like tin foil under the blow. Alsus catches his comrade just in time, while the blonde commander barks orders to hold the line against the new threat. She turns to Root, promising support, but the grim look on his face says their situation just went from bad to nightmare. A colossal golem head rises from the earth, its jaws opening to reveal the pilot nestled inside like a tongue. Root grits his teeth, realizing the boss battle has officially started earlier than he planned. Floria waves cheerfully from inside the monster's mouth, greeting her terrified sister with a toxic sweetness. Lillian trembles, her trauma resurfacing instantly as she begs Root to call a retreat. But Cirrus steps in to assert command, while Root boldly assigns the knights to stall the dragon so he can handle the witch. He shouts the objective clearly. The squad holds the beast, while he and Lillian take down the Witch of Creation. Floria hops down from her perch, looking less like a combatant and more like a girl ready for a tea party. Ceres doesn't hesitate, her eyes narrowing as she prepares to engage the greatest threat to the kingdom. She activates Enchant Thunder Emperor, wreathing herself in lightning to match the witch's speed. Floria transforms her arms into massive claws, scoffing at their confidence just because they broke one of her toys. She spins through the battlefield, deflecting debris and attacks with a casual, terrifying grace. The clearing erupts into chaos, with lightning and magic clashing against the witch's shape-shifting defense. Floria laughs maniacally, declaring that she's done playing with dolls and is ready to tear them apart personally. Her arm elongates into a massive blade, swinging down with enough force to cleave the earth in two. Root shouts the command, and Lillian syncs with him instantly, casting a flight spell to escape the kill zone. Green wind magic wraps around them, launching the pair into the sky just as the blade crashes down. The ground shatters where they stood a second ago, the impact sending a shockwave through the forest. Floria looks up in surprise, realizing her prey has taken the fight into the third dimension. Root and Lillian dive from the heavens, using gravity and magic to turn themselves into a living missile. The witch's smile falters, annoyed that the trash keeps running away instead of dying quietly. She flares her mana, preparing to swat them out of the air for the audacity of mocking her. Floria reveals her persistence by fusing with a massive golem body, transforming into a centaur-like nightmare to chase them down. Root grabs Lillian and speeds up, thinking he needs to drag this fight away from the knights to keep his true abilities a secret. The witch screams in manic delight, her face twisted with the thrill of the hunt as she closes the distance like a predator. They weave through the dense forest, green wind magic trailing behind them as they create the necessary gap between them and the army. Floria leaps high into the air, her massive stone claws raised to crush the insects that dare to run from her. Root skids to a halt, his eyes scanning the terrain as he decides that this secluded clearing is the perfect grave for a witch. He spins around, digging his heels into the dirt as he prepares to stop running and start fighting. His hand brushes the ground to stabilize his stance, the momentum of the chase shifting instantly into a battle stance. Floria crashes down with earth-shattering force, her claws tearing up the soil where they stood just a fraction of a second ago. She roars in frustration, her eyes bulging with rage that her targets are slippery enough to dodge her grand entrance. Relentless, she swings her stone limbs in a frenzy, tearing through trees and rocks in a desperate bid to land a hit. Her face is a mask of pure fury, unable to comprehend how two weaklings are dancing around her overwhelming power. Root and Lillian finally stand their ground, facing the monstrosity that is now glaring at them with pure hatred. Floria points an accusatory finger, complaining that running away and using sneak attacks is cheating, which is rich coming from her. Rout smirks, his expression calm and collected, as he tells her that the retreat was purely strategic. He draws his blade, the steel gleaming in the magical light as he warns her to stop talking and start worrying. His aura flares, declaring that since there are no witnesses around, he's going to come at her with everything he has. Floria laughs, the sound dripping with condescension as she finds the idea of him threatening her absolutely hilarious. She looms over him, her massive form casting a shadow as she asks who exactly he thinks he's talking to. Lillian watches nervously from behind, but Root stands firm, his focus locked on the monster in front of him. Floria spreads her arms, promising to tear him into confetti before she turns her attention back to doting on her sister. She brings a massive stone fist down, but Root meets the attack head-on, his sword clashing against the rock with a shower of sparks. He grits his teeth, the sheer weight of the golem pressing down on him, testing the limits of his strength. The size difference is absurd, but Root holds the line, proving that technique beats tonnage every time. Lillian's eyes burn with determination, and she declares that she is done being the victim and is ready to fight too. Root deflects the heavy blow, sliding back to create an opening for his partner to unleash her magic. Lillian screams the incantation, gathering a massive sphere of flames in her hands to cast Fireball. The spell launches point blank, slamming into Floria's face with the force of a cannon shot. An explosion of fire and light engulfs the witch, blinding her momentarily as the heat roars through the clearing. Rout seizes the moment, leaping through the smoke and flames with his sword raised to deliver a critical strike. Floria emerges from the flames with a mocking sneer, asking if they really thought a little heat would be enough to scratch her. Root's eyes widen in genuine shock, realizing their ace in the hole just fizzled out completely. A massive stone fist connects with brutal force, sending the young mage tumbling before she can process the failure. Rout is blown back by the shockwave, skidding across the dirt as their offensive momentum hits a brick wall. Floria hugs herself with a twisted glee, cooing her sister's name like she's scolding a naughty pet. She reveals that she's been doing her homework, having analyzed Lillian's magical signature during the village battle. The witch drops the hard counter, explaining that fire element attacks are statistically useless against her specific build. Lillian stares in horror, her confidence shattering as her strongest spell is dismissed as a party trick. Rout hits the ground, his mind racing as he identifies the passive skill Shinra Flame Nullification. Floria lectures them on elemental matchups, explaining that since fire hurts the world tree, she evolved to become fireproof. Root rises from the dust, his Shadow Knight manifesting behind him as he refuses to stay down. The boy and his shadow stand defiant against the Centaur-Golem hybrid, though the odds are looking mathematically impossible. Lillian refuses to give up, beginning a desperate chant to call down the scorching flames of heaven once more. The Shadow Knight lunges to buy time, but Floria intercepts the attack with terrifying speed. A stone hand clamps down, crushing the dark construct's weapon like a twig. Floria lifts the Shadow Knight by its neck, intrigued by the unique composition of Root's little toy. Lillian screams the incantation, pouring every ounce of her fear and mana into a point-blank flame breath. A torrent of golden fire engulfs the witch, a blinding display of raw power that would vaporize a normal monster. But Floria stands amidst the inferno unharmed, casually reminding them that her nullification is absolute. She crushes the shadow construct in her grip, sneering that Lillian is a one-trick pony who only knows how to burn things. The witch looms over them, asking with genuine curiosity if they have any other parlor tricks before she ends this. Her laughter echoes through the forest, a manic sound that signals playtime is officially over. Root sweats, his tactical mind scrambling for a solution now that their main damage source has been nerfed. Lillian is hyperventilating, the trauma of her sister's invincibility threatening to break her mind again. She looks down, trembling, but a spark of memory from the commander's buff earlier ignites in her mind. Her chant changes, calling not for fire, but for the torrent of lightning that rends the sky. Floria decides she's bored of the monologue and swings her massive blade arm to execute them both. Root steps in, catching the massive stone blade with his own steel in a shower of sparks. He holds the line against the Titan, mocking her for getting careless just because she thought she won. Floria's eyes widen in genuine surprise, realizing the insect has enough strength to stop her stomp. Root strains against the crushing weight, his sword the only thing stopping the stone limb from flattening him. Floria leans in with a sadistic grin, confessing that she absolutely adores the moment a rat realizes it's trapped. But a blinding light erupts from behind, signaling that the useless sister has finished her chant. Root grits his teeth, bracing for impact as the air pressure drops violently around them. Floria's laughter dies in her throat, her eyes widening as she senses a mana signature that shouldn't exist. It's not the fire she prepared for, but a chaotic surge of energy that catches her completely off guard. A massive bolt of lightning crashes down, striking the golem with the fury of a storm god. Floria screams in disbelief, unable to comprehend how a fire mage just hit her with high-level lightning magic. Lillian stands panting, her finger pointing at the target, having successfully channeled the Thunder Emperor buff Cirrus gave them earlier. Root seizes the opening, launching himself at the stunned witch while her systems are rebooting. He gets right in her face, telling her that her fatal mistake was assuming Lillian would always be a victim. Lillian watches with bated breath, her heart pounding as she realizes she actually landed the hit. Root activates Mana Severance, his blade glowing with a light that cuts through energy rather than flesh. The strike passes through her, severing the flow of mana that sustains her golem form instantly. The massive stone body crumbles into dust, and Root lands softly, catching the unconscious witch before she hits the ground. The system reveals the strategy. Spamming fire spells was a psychological trap to make her lower her guard against other elements. By combining Cirrus's lightning enchantment with Root's guidance, they turned Lillian into the ultimate hard counter. Lillian rushes over, her voice trembling as she asks about the fate of the sister who tried to kill her. Root looks down at the sleeping tyrant, assuring Lillian that he spared her life, though mostly for practical reasons. The world tree looms ahead, its massive branches glowing with a light that feels both holy and ominous. Rout explains that they need Floria alive, as her bloodline is the only key that will unlock the path to the matriarch. Meanwhile, the battle in the sky rages on, with the mechanical dragon proving to be a much tougher nut to crack. Ceres barks orders to her squad, realizing that standard attacks are bouncing off the construct's armor. She activates Enchant Ice Emperor, creating a massive magic circle to imbue her troops with freezing power. The dragon retaliates with a roar, unleashing a torrent of scorching flames to melt the ice before it can form. But Alsace charges through the inferno, his ice-enchanted blade creating a protective tunnel of cold air. He leaps into the sky, aiming a desperate strike at the beast's head to ground it once and for all. He brings the sword down with a shout, a massive wave of frost crashing against the dragon's metallic hide. The dragon counters with a point-blank fire breath, the collision of elements creating a violent explosion of steam. The knights watch in horror as their support arrows evaporate instantly, realizing the beast's heat is overwhelming. The forest erupts in chaos as the mechanical dragon unleashes a bombardment that threatens to wipe the squad off the map. Ceres stares at the overwhelming surge of mana, realizing their defensive enchantments might not be enough to survive this. She screams for her troops to form a phalanx behind her, rallying their courage even as the world burns around them. A massive barrier of light erupts from her shield, a desperate attempt to hold back the tide of destruction. Gritting her teeth, she accepts that even if they perish here, their sacrifice will buy time for the main army to arrive. The dragon circles back, its metallic maw glowing with the heat of a second, more lethal breath attack. Energy gathers in its throat, a blinding light that signals the end for the knights on the ground. But just as it prepares to fire, the beast flinches, its head snapping back as if yanked by an invisible leash. Ceres watches in confusion, the lethal beam dissipating harmlessly into the sky instead of incinerating her team. The dragon's movements become erratic, its head twisting against its own will as something overrides its programming. Its wings beat frantically, abandoning the attack run and pulling into a steep, unnatural climb. The beast rockets toward the upper atmosphere, leaving the bewildered knights staring at its retreating tail. Alsa shouts in disbelief, announcing that the monster is actually fleeing the battlefield. The squad erupts into cheers, convinced their grit won the day, while Cirrus wonders why a winning enemy would suddenly quit. Deep in the forest, Root kneels over the unconscious Floria, his hands glowing as he works his own kind of magic. He exhales a breath he didn't know he was holding, confirming that he managed to hack the system just in the nick of time. Lillian stares at him in horror, asking what he's doing to her sister, unaware that he's currently hijacking a biological Wi-Fi signal. Root's eyes snap upward, his connection to the network confirming that his ride has arrived. The mechanical dragon descends from the canopy, no longer a predator but a loyal taxi service. Lillian shrieks, her trauma response kicking in as the massive metal beast lands inches from her face. She scrambles backward in the dirt, terrified that the monster has come back to finish the job. Root calmly explains that by hacking Floria's mana signature, he has seized administrative control over her pet. He hoists the unconscious witch onto the dragon's back, leaving Lillian stunned by his casual dominance over an S-rank threat. Extending a hand, he invites her aboard, declaring that they are taking the express route to the World Tree. The dragon launches into the sky, carrying the trio toward their destiny while leaving the confused knights far behind. Root calculates their trajectory, noting that with air superiority, they will reach the objective long before Cirrus's squad. Lillian worries about the passenger, asking what happens if the Witch of Creation wakes up mid-flight and chooses violence. Root assures her the witch is out cold for hours, and even if she wakes, he holds the keys to the car now. Sunlight breaks through the clouds, illuminating his face as the final destination comes into view. The World Tree looms ahead, but Lillian's gasp draws their attention to the tragic figure fused into its branches. Root's internal radar pings a warning, sensing that their smooth flight is about to hit severe turbulence. Hovering ahead is Elvira, the eldest sister, who has already reclaimed the unconscious Floria from their care. Root stares her down, realizing that the diplomatic phase of this mission has just been cancelled. Elvira's voice booms across the sky, ordering the trespassers to leave her airspace or face the consequences. Lillian looks up at the terrifying figure of her eldest sister, her voice trembling as she tries to bridge the gap. She shouts desperately that they aren't enemies, begging for a chance to speak with their mother. Root backs her up, insisting they have no hostile intent, though he keeps his hand ready on the controls. Elvira smirks with chilling disbelief, clearly thinking their peace mission is a bad joke. Her eyes narrow as she identifies them as the culprits who turned Floria into a ragdoll. Lillian recoils, realizing that logic has left the building and violence is moving in. Elvira raises a hand invoking the Thunder Emperor to deliver a summary execution from the clouds. Jagged bolts of lightning rain down, turning the sky into a blinding cage of electricity. The strikes hammer the mechanical dragon, engulfing the riders in a deafening storm of ozone and light. But the beast flies through the smoke unscathed, its armor apparently rated for family drama. Elvira clicks her tongue, annoyed that they dared to hijack a golem belonging to the World Tree. She glances at the sleeping Floria in her arms, muttering that she'll have to scold her later for losing a pet. Glowing with mana, she decides to clear the battlefield of liabilities before getting serious. With a flash of light, she teleports Floria safely into the World Tree, removing the hostage leverage. Root grits his teeth, telling Lillian that the only way forward now is to knock the eldest sister out of the sky. He banks the dragon hard, driving the massive machine straight up to challenge the witch. Elvira watches their approach with bored eyes, wondering why the insects are so eager to be squashed. The dragon spins, whipping its heavy tail around in a crushing arc aimed at her head. Elvira scoffs, mocking their audacity for trying to use a World Tree creation against its master. The tail swings in, but the attack is telegraphed and seemingly futile against a mage of her caliber. She blocks it effortlessly with a barrier, preparing to dismantle the machine piece by piece. But Rout is already in the system, his interface rewriting the golem's energy flow in real time. He smirks, revealing that he's overclocked the engine and voided the warranty. Elvira's eyes widen as the dragon's mouth glows with an intensity that shouldn't be possible. A crimson flame spear erupts from the maw, a concentrated beam of destruction that engulfs the witch. Lillian gasps in amazement, realizing that for the first time in history, someone actually landed a hit on Elvira. Root cuts the celebration short, warning Lillian to listen closely because the fight is far from over. Elvira's voice drips with malice as she processes the sheer audacity of someone actually wounding her. She clenches her fist, revealing with a terrifying calm that not even her mother has ever managed to strike her. The mechanical dragon roars, diving back into the fray with Rout, and Lillian clinging to its back for dear life. It unleashes a torrent of fire, aiming to incinerate the witch while she's momentarily distracted. But Elvira simply raises a hand, blocking the inferno as effortlessly as if she's swatting away a fly. She spreads her arms, her aura exploding outward as she decides to stop playing with broken toys. With a cold command, she orders the machine to return to dust where it belongs. A massive blast of lightning obliterates the dragon, shattering the construct in midair with a deafening boom. Root and Lillian are thrown from the explosion, plummeting toward the forest canopy amidst the falling debris. They crash land in a clearing, hitting the ground hard but rolling to their feet instantly. Elvira floats down, mocking them for losing their ride and their only advantage in a single move. The duo stares up at the storm goddess, realizing they are now trapped on her turf without air support. Elvira grins with manic delight, asking if they have prepared their final words before the end. Rout looks up defiantly, acknowledging the terrifying power of the Witch of the Storm without flinching. She raises a finger, calling down the Thunder Emperor's summons to carpet bomb the entire area. Lightning spears slam into the earth, forcing Rout and Lillian to sprint through the destruction to survive. The ground explodes with every step, Elvira laughing as she hunts the quick little rats through the woods. But Root isn't panicking. He's analyzing, shouting that he can read her attacks like an open book. He taunts her, claiming that her massive mana pool is wasted on someone with zero technique. His interface flashes blue, the attack path guide highlighting the safe zones amidst the chaos. Elvira looks down with disdain, annoyed that the insect is still talking instead of dying. Rout shouts that for all her high and mighty posturing, she still hasn't landed a single hit on him. Elvira pauses, realizing he's trying to bait her into coming down to his level. But her arrogance is her weakness, and she decides to play along with his little game just to crush his hope. She descends, wreathed in lightning, confident she can destroy him regardless of his plans. Charging a massive spell, she warns him that no amount of scheming will block this attack. Root's eye glows with intensity, his trap set the moment she decided to engage him directly. Alvira dives for the kill, promising to make him regret his life choices in the afterlife. Root stands his ground, dark energy erupting from his body as he declares her arrogance is her downfall. Alvira gazes toward the world tree, her arrogance blinding her to the threat standing right behind her. Root whispers an apology in her ear, his voice the only warning she gets before the trap springs. Her eyes widen in pure shock, realizing too late that her absolute defense has a blind spot. A burst of concentrated mana erupts between them, Root unleashing his attack at point-blank range. His expression is fierce, driven by the desperate need to save his sister no matter the cost. The impact sends the invincible witch flying, her body tumbling through the air like a rag doll. She skids across the ground, her perfect composure shattered along with her defense. For a moment, time seems to freeze as the reality of her vulnerability sinks in. Root doesn't hesitate, pressing the advantage while she's still processing the impossible. The fear in her eyes confirms that the insect has finally become a predator. Another surge of power flares, ensuring the Storm Witch stays down for the count. Root's resolve hardens, knowing that mercy is a luxury he can't afford right now. Alvira hits the dirt hard, the legend of her invincibility ending in a cloud of dust. With the threat neutralized, Root turns to Lillian, confirming that their crazy gamble actually worked. He begins to explain the mechanics of their victory, revealing the strategy behind the chaos. A flashback takes us to the planning phase, where Rout admitted a head-on fight was a death sentence. Lillian had been terrified, unable to imagine a world where they could outsmart her terrifying sister. Alvira was a walking natural disaster, an opponent that required a cheat code to defeat. Root had produced that cheat code, handing Lillian a glowing red artifact from his inventory. It was the core of the Shadowless Spider, a magic stone capable of erasing their presence completely. He instructed her to use the stealth to get close, then dodge and weave to create an opening. But speed was the missing variable, so he asked her to replicate the fastest magic she knew. Lillian was confused until she remembered her unique talent for copying spells she's experienced. The memory of the Thunder Emperor buff flooded back, giving her the velocity needed to bypass Elvira's radar. Rout placed his trust in her, assuring the trembling girl that she had the power to pull this off. They launched their assault, a synchronized strike that relied entirely on Lillian's newfound courage. In the heat of the moment, she screamed her acceptance, fully committing to the plan. Back in the present, Root carries the unconscious Alvira, proud that Lillian exceeded all expectations. He holds the defeated witch easily, having turned the forest's greatest threat into harmless luggage. With the path finally clear, Root sets his sights on the world tree, ready to confront the matriarch herself. With the skies cleared, Lillian leads the way to the massive trunk, her hesitation replaced by resolve. She places a hand on the bark, reconnecting with the ancient entity that defined her entire existence. Taking a deep breath, she announces her return, stepping back into the home that once rejected her. They enter the glowing hollow of the roots, carrying the defeated sisters into the sanctuary. Inside, the matriarch awaits, and Lillian calls out to the mother she hasn't seen since her exile. The witch of the world tree stirs, her eyes opening slowly as she processes the intrusion. Recognition flashes across her face as she identifies the daughter standing before her. The family is finally reunited, though two of them are unconscious and the third was supposed to be trash. Verdana's gaze softens, her ancient eyes seeing past the fear to the strength underneath. Instead of anger, she offers a warm smile, acknowledging that her failure has become strong. Lillian tears up, the validation from her mother healing a wound she's carried for years. Root steps forward, addressing the Witch of Regeneration with the respect due a deity. He invokes her title, seeking the power that weaves life and breathes vitality into the earth. Clutching his chest, he begs her to save Rona, the sister whose soul is currently sharing his body. Verdana glances at the boy, realizing he is the reason Lillian has evolved so drastically. Lillian joins the plea, desperate for her mother to lend them the power to fix a tragedy. The witch reaches out with a wooden hand, gently touching the face of the child she abandoned. She asks with genuine sadness why Lillian looks so determined instead of resentful. Lillian's eyes remain clear, the bitterness of the past washed away by her new purpose. She grips her mother's hand, revealing that she remembers the lessons taught long ago. The narrative shifts back 14 years, to a time when the family was whole and happy. The three sisters sit together, listening to their mother's wisdom before power tore them apart. Verdana explains their sacred duty to protect the world tree and watch over its growth. Young Floria complains loudly, proving she was a brat even before she became a villain. While Elvira smiles serenely, a curious Lillian asks the fundamental question of their existence. The sisters laugh together, a stark contrast to the lethal battle they just fought in the future. They sit on the roots, united by a destiny that would eventually pit them against each other. Verdana embraces them all, declaring her love for every single one of her daughters. The memory proves that the cruelty wasn't always there, and a bond once existed. Back in the present, Lillian declares that she finally understands the true meaning of protection. Verdana looks at her daughter with a gaze full of ancient sorrow and hidden love. Lillian pieces the puzzle together, realizing her exile wasn't an act of cruelty, but a desperate bid to keep her safe from their grim duty. The matriarch confirms the truth, admitting that those bound to the world tree are prisoners of its fading light. Tears well up in Lillian's eyes as she understands that being powerless was the only ticket to freedom her mother could give her. She confronts the past, realizing the cold rejection was actually the warmest protection a mother could offer. Verdana turns her attention to the boy who brought her family back together, thanking him for helping her daughter find her strength. She agrees to cooperate, her smile offering a glimmer of hope for their mission. Root wastes no time immediately asking for the miracle he came here for, saving his sister. But Verdana's expression falls, and she delivers the crushing news that granting his wish is currently impossible. She explains that the source of her magic, the world tree itself, is withering away. Without the tree's vitality, her powers of regeneration are a shadow of what they once were. Beside them, the unconscious sisters stir, the tension in the room spiking as the heavy hitters wake up. Elvira sits up with a snarl, mocking the idea that the world will end if their precious tree dies. She confronts her mother, her voice dripping with the bitterness of a prisoner realizing the bars might be fake. The eldest sister screams that the duty is just a lie invented to chain them to a dying corpse. Glaring at the group, she claims to see through the deception, rejecting the burden that ruined their lives. The outburst stuns the room, the family reunion turning into a shouting match about existential dread. But the argument is cut short by a violent tremor that shakes the hollow to its roots. Outside, the bark of the world tree erupts in flames, signaling that the war has arrived at their doorstep. The blonde commander stands at the edge of the clearing, her bow drawn as she leads the assault on the monster's nest. She shouts an ultimatum, threatening to burn the entire forest down if the witches don't surrender. Elvira's face twists into a mask of pure rage, her mana flaring as she prepares to slaughter the maggots outside. Rout steps in her path, his voice cutting through her bloodlust with cold logic. He explains that this invasion isn't random. It's a direct consequence of her attacking the human settlements earlier. Elvira freezes, the realization hitting her that her own lash-out is what brought the army here. Root warns her that killing these knights will only bring more, creating a cycle of vengeance that ends with the tree burning. The truth pierces her arrogance, leaving her stunned as she processes the mess she made. She slumps back, the fight draining out of her as she mutters that it wasn't supposed to be like this. Verdana steps forward, her ancient wisdom recognizing that a full-scale war with humanity is a death sentence for their sanctuary. Root makes a bold offer, asking the matriarch to trust him with the defense of the tree while she handles the internal crisis. Ceres stares up at the massive trunk, knowing the source of the kingdom's nightmare is hiding just beneath the bark. With a heavy heart, she decides that saving her people requires burning down a legend, raising her hand to give the order. But a desperate shout cuts through the tension, begging them to hold their fire before they make a mistake they can't undo. The knights freeze, weapons lowered in confusion as they look for the source of the interruption. A pair of boots steps calmly out of the sanctuary, walking into the line of fire without a hint of fear. Root emerges from the glowing entrance, shielding his eyes from the sun as he delivers a warning about the land's blessings. He looks the commander dead in the eye, stating plainly that burning the world tree is strictly off the table. Alsace gasps, demanding to know how a civilian managed to infiltrate the most dangerous dungeon on the continent. Root ignores the question, casually announcing that the threat has been neutralized and the army can go home now. Alsace snaps back, arguing that retreating now would just leave the neighboring towns open to more magical bombardment. Root steps aside with a theatrical gesture, revealing that he hasn't come empty-handed. He introduces his prisoners, shocking the soldiers into silence as the legends of the forest step into the light. The three witches walk out in single file, their hands bound, surrendering to the boy who bested them. Verdana leads the procession, her regal bearing making the ropes look more like jewelry than restraints. Ceres stares in disbelief, her mind struggling to process that the terrifying guardians have been captured by a kid. The sisters stand silently behind their mother, looking less like prisoners of war and more like bored royalty. The knights murmur amongst themselves, the impossible sight of the subdued witches shattering their expectations. Root plays the role of the bounty hunter, offering the villains to the commander to do with as she pleases. Ceres steps forward to face the matriarch, the tension between the two leaders thick enough to cut with a sword. She confirms the identity of the woman before her, addressing the Witch of the World Tree with cautious respect. Her voice hardens as she demands to know why guardians of nature would launch unprovoked attacks on humanity. Verdana answers with ancient dignity, explaining that their sacred duty is to eliminate threats to the tree. She warns that without the tree's blessings, the soil will turn to dust and the kingdom will starve. Ceres counters with the logical flaw, asking how burning villages miles away helps protect a tree standing here. Root interrupts the interrogation with a smile, announcing that he and Lillian will be hitting the road to see the world. The scene shifts to the knights departing, Ceres offering an open invitation for Root to join their ranks if he ever gets bored. Root and Lillian wave goodbye, having successfully brokered a peace treaty without shedding a drop of blood. As the army disappears over the horizon, the duo stands before the world tree, the massive roots now a shelter instead of a target. Lillian beams with relief, amazed that their crazy plan to fake a surrender actually worked. Inside the hollow, the sisters are left stunned, realizing Root didn't just break their toys, he reprogrammed them on the fly. Verdana offers a rare compliment, acknowledging that his guide skill is far more impressive than she initially gave him credit for. She admits that without that unique power, he never would have navigated the deadly path to stand before her now. Root looks up with determination, confirming that he bet everything on this slim chance to change his sister's fate. But the peaceful atmosphere shatters instantly as the massive roots around them begin to writhe with aggressive intent. Before he can react, the wood lashes out like a viper, wrapping around Root and hoisting him into the air while Lillian screams in panic. Verdana stands unmoved by the sudden violence, her expression shifting from gratitude to the cold calculation of a guardian. She leans in with a sharp glare, realizing that his all-seeing eye has already uncovered the world tree's darkest secret. Root doesn't deny it, confirming he knows the tree is infested with monsters that are slowly draining its magic dry. A grotesque pink parasite is revealed clinging to the bark, a visual confirmation of the rot hiding beneath the majesty. Lillian stares in horror at the creature, realizing the sacred guardian she worshipped is actually a host for a nightmare. Verdana's voice drops to a chilling whisper, accusing Rout of seeking to destroy the world by interfering with the natural order. Root stares back with burning intensity, refusing to accept the label of villain when he's the only one trying to fix the mess.